The Rockstar's Virginity. Book 3 in the Romance Island Resort series. Written by Demelza Carlton. Autonarrated by AI Chris from Google. 1. Only 6 weeks left until you get your happily ever after. Better get that ass in perfect shape so that hot man of yours won't be able to keep his hands off it. By the time I'm done with you, he'll be begging to spank you. Come do cardio on the treadmills with me, Violet insisted, tugging on Flavia's towel-laden arm. Pilates works your core, but you'll need stamina for your wedding night. You and James can thank me later. No spanking and definitely no kink allowed at my wedding night. Flavia snorted. And my stamina's just fine. I spent over an hour chasing Mum's new stupid horse through the bush paddock yesterday. I've told Dad to get higher fences to keep him in, but until he does, the minute something spooks him, he's up and over the fence, and I have to catch him before he runs onto the road or something. I'll talk to you while I do my stretches, but then I have to go to the hairdressers to book an appointment for my trial. I told them my hair won't curl, but David says otherwise. You aren't married yet? What's taking so long? Teased Robbie the personal trainer as he wandered past. When's your bachelorette party? I heard you were looking for a stripper. Violet laughed. I wanted one, but you're out of luck. Flavia won't have any strippers at her hen's night. Besides, we're leaving the country. We're having a week in Bali, just the bride and her bridesmaids. Cocktails by the beach, daily massages, the works. She winked at Flavia. Our expert travel agent here knows all the best places and what to do where. Robbie didn't seem to be listening. I bet her boyfriend will have strippers at his bachelor party. If the best man doesn't book strippers, he's not doing his job properly. Of course, sometimes he does his job too well. Check out this guy. He organized his mate's bucks night, but he didn't get a stripper. Robbie whipped out his phone and swiped at the screen until he appeared satisfied. Here he is. This guy hired a prostitute for his mate's bucks night, then got him so drunk that he passed out before he could enjoy his gift. So the best man, taking his role very seriously in the most traditional way, stood in for the groom and gave it to her instead. He held out his phone for the girls to see. Violet squinted at the screen. Bit blurry. You can't see much. Flavia leaned over and nodded in agreement. She could just make out the couple, one with enormous boobs and the other looked vaguely male. He wore a watch that looked a little like the one she'd bought James. Robbie swiped the screen. How about now? He was really banging her. Flavia's heart stopped. The sordid shot showed far more than she wanted to see. A girl with too much makeup and a fake grin plastered on her face bent over someone's dining table, while a man who looked frighteningly like James plowed into her from behind. It couldn't be, surely it was just a coincidence. Some other bloke who just looked like James. James had been on a pub crawl with his mates on Saturday, not a bucks night. It couldn't be him, and if she only looked harder, she'd see that. Do her, mate? Just like you'll do your hot little V on your wedding night, one of the onlookers slurred. Hot little V? Flavia stared at the screen, unable to look away. She recognized the watch he wore. His favorite pub crawl t-shirt, the one with a sozzled frog on the front, wrinkling with every thrust. When he pulled back, she glimpsed that mole beside his treasure trail that no one but she had ever seen. That's disgusting. I can't believe you filmed a couple having sex, Violet snapped. Robbie shrugged, his eyes still firmly turned toward the screen. Wasn't me. Someone stuck this up on the internet and I only saw it when someone showed Davo what he might have missed out on, drinking too much on his bucks night. Violet's cheeks turned an angry shade of pink. Whatever. Put it away, Robbie. Flavia couldn't think. Couldn't speak. How could James? She found herself standing outside in the rain, with no memory of leaving the building, as Violet thrust her gym bag at her. Are you all right? Violet asked. You never forget your stuff. You're misorganized. No one else could have handled that last ash cloud nightmare the way you did when your manager was away and earned Rookie of the Year at the National Travel Industry Awards. 50 stranded exchange students, all home in time for the start of term. They created the category for you. Your wedding is going to be the best planned event since the last royal wedding. Flavia laughed bitterly. Even if the groom's been banging prostitutes behind my back while promising he'll save himself for marriage, like I am? Violet's eyebrows flew up into her fringe. James? I don't believe it. I know that picture looked a little bit like him, sure, but it couldn't be him. He has a doppelganger who wears the same shirt and watch and has an identical birthmark to James? Flavia's voice shook. It's him. I'd know him anywhere vi. Violet grabbed Flavia's shoulders and looked deep into her soul, even if the view was blurred by the bride-to-be's rapidly multiplying tears. If it is James, and I'm not saying it is, seeing as I didn't get a very good look at Robbie's phone and it was a bad picture anyway, what are you going to do? I don't know. Call off the wedding, call the police. Can you get arrested for sleeping with a prostitute? I know it's illegal in America. Go over to his house, key the paintwork on his car and slash all the upholstery, then drive it into the river. No, first I'm going to get laid. Then I'm going to tell him I'm not a virgin anymore before I trash his precious baby. Flavia let out a shaky laugh. Listen to me, I'm so angry I'm trying to plan Grand Theft Auto and I can't even do that right. Okay, first, prostitution isn't illegal in Australia. Not for the girls who do it or the guys who pay them. Murder is illegal though, and so's damaging his car. So no police and no cutting. Violet took a deep breath. I want you to go straight home. If you want to steal cars, I'll borrow one of my brother's computer games and you can play that all night if you like. If you're seriously looking to get laid, promise me you'll wait for the weekend, or at least until you've talked to James. Promise me, girl. Violet's eyes pinned her. Flavia sighed. All right, I promise. It's not like I'd know how to pick up a guy anyway. It feels like James and First have been together forever. Now, I don't know what to do. You and James will work this out, you'll see. Now home, dinner, distraction, then bed. In that order. Flavia nodded numbly. How could anyone work out a future this shattered? One thing she knew for sure, when she did come up with a plan, it would be all about revenge. No one ripped her heart out and got away with it unscathed. Not even James. 2. What do you say to a man who's just lost his wife? For the first time in her life, Zan didn't know what to do. So she stood at the head of the Penguin jetty, a bottle of rum dangling from her hand, as she stared at the forlorn figure sitting on the end. Finally she said, I brought you something. You don't even like me. What are you doing here? Jay asked over his shoulder, not looking at Zan. His gaze was fixed on the horizon and the incoming tide, which would soon turn the precipitous drop at his feet into gently lapping waves. He wasn't seriously considering jumping, was he? Zan marched along the jetty. Truce, please. I swear. I wouldn't wish this on my worst enemy. No, this was exactly what she'd wish on that faithless wanker, Jerome. Okay, well maybe him but not you. I believe that girl was everything she said she was, same as you. I keep thinking it's some sort of horrible mistake. A case of mistaken identity or something. Are you sure that she really? What? That she's a triple murderer who killed not only her husband but 2 backpackers too. A black widow, my sister tells me, who confessed to her crimes the moment she saw the police. And I was her next target. Luckily for me, Fung's husband isn't dead, so she's not even really my wife. She's still going to be represented by my legal team though. The band's lawyers and PR people cut a deal with her. If she keeps me out of all the proceedings and pleads guilty to everything she did, we'll pay for her legal fees through the whole court case. And no further contact with me ever. She didn't even hesitate. Fuck. He grabbed the bottle from Zan's hand, wrenched off the cap and gulped the contents. A week ago, I was happily married to a woman I loved, or at least I thought I did. Now my sister says I didn't really know her at all. A murderer, and everything we had together was fucking fiction. I thought she was genuinely traumatized, and now I'm supposed to believe it was all a lie? Fuck. He took another swig from the rum bottle. Your sister, Jo, she called and asked me to remind you that your security specialist advises against any further contact with Fung. Any contact will mean she has to foot her own legal bills. Zan sat on the boards, dangling her legs over the side of the jetty. You know, I was as taken in by her as you were. I thought she was for real too. But if she's that good an actress, then maybe it's all part of the act to lull you into a false sense of security before she, well, does her thing. It doesn't matter how many times I hear it, I still don't believe it. You know she asked to see me before the police took her away? 5 minutes and she'd never bother me again, she said. They told her I'd said no, but they never fucking told me until after she flew away. She was so calm until they loaded her into the helicopter. Then she started screaming about how she'd never intended to hurt me. Her husband had deserved everything he got and she'd do it all again, but not to me. Never to me. Fuck knows what's true anymore. I don't. You know how she tried to kill her last husband? Jay offered her the rum. Zan squinted down the neck of the bottle, wondering what diseases Jay had, then decided she didn't care right now. She drank. Burnt sugar blazed down her throat. Jay continued, she tried to make it look like an accident. The poor bastard's allergic to peanuts, so she poisoned him with peanut oil. It would have worked too if she hadn't left him. When he discovered she was gone, he called the police, and while he was on the emergency hotline he went into anaphylactic shock. If she'd stayed with him for another half hour he'd be dead, but she ran like she panicked. She must have driven for days without sleep to get here in the time she did. Makes me think she was right and the bastard did deserve whatever he got. Jay's fist pounded the boards. I don't care what anyone says. I know what I saw. The fear in her eyes was real. Just like the look in Angel's eyes. You can't fake that. So what are you going to do? The moment the words were out of her mouth, Zan regretted them. What could he do? Jay's lips lifted in a mirthless grin. Do what she wants. Give her the best lawyers money can buy and hope they can help her. And stay away from her because that's what she wants. Wouldn't be the first time a rape survivor threatened me with death or permanent injury. I should be used to it by now. But even if everything's true, I could never trust her again because in the back of my mind I'll always wonder. He snatched back the bottle and chugged it, then wiped his mouth on the back of his hand. I don't want to die. There's shit I haven't done yet. Like get married, seeing as the first time didn't count. Zan's heart breathed a sigh of relief. She'd done her bit and talked him off the proverbial ledge, even if his backside hadn't budged. Now she could go back to disliking him as wholeheartedly as before. Maybe next time you should try finding a girl who isn't married and hasn't killed anyone, or at least ask her first. Jay snorted. When she could lie? I'd need a fucking virgin. Even then, she still might be a murderer. Zan shrugged. Love's always a gamble. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. Yes, Jay had had monumentally bad luck lately, but he'd still come out on top. Damn it, why couldn't it be her turn to win for once? She wished Jay good night and headed for the hotel manager's house on the other side of the lagoon. Tonight she'd cook her own dinner. She didn't feel cheerful enough to brave the staff dining room with her heart so heavy. Maybe she'd break out some more of that rum for herself, because the little nagging voice in her head insisted that if someone with all Jay's rockstar charms couldn't be lucky in love, what hope did she have in finding a happily ever after? 3. Morning, V. How are your plans for the perfect wedding coming? James' half-asleep morning voice sounded sexier than it had any right to. Especially when she was mad at him. Fine, Flavia lied. What else could she answer? It wasn't like she could say she'd seen a video of him having sex with a prostitute, so she hadn't done a thing about their wedding. She'd been too busy exploring options for revenge. True to her promise to Violet, she hadn't yet decided on a plan. She'd waited all week until she felt her fury had simmered down enough for her to be civil on the phone. Only now could she say calmly, "Are you coming up today?" I really want to see you. Or I miss you too, V. No can do. I have to go to the auto auction today. There's a few clapped-out classics the boss wants me to keep an eye out for, ones that were stolen and trashed. He figures they'll go for a steal and we can use the parts for our other clients. The passion in James' voice was unmistakable. If only he loved her half as much as he loved classic cars. Tomorrow then, she persisted. She couldn't ask him over the phone. She needed to look into his eyes and know he wasn't lying when he told her the man banging the prostitute in the video wasn't him. Sorry, nope. Tomorrow I have to pick up whatever we win in the auction. Daz's got the lift truck booked, because he's hoping to pick up one of the repossessed cars they're selling at the auction. A Holden of all things. I've told him he should be looking at classic Fords like my Fairlane, but no, he wants that bloody Holden. I told him it's only the insurance company write-offs that go for a song, and he'll have to pay a premium if he wants the pristine queen of someone's private collection. Pristine queen? An idea began to form in Flavia's mind. What do you mean? He's got his eye on this Sandman. Beautiful car for a Holden. Seized by the police on her maiden voyage, speeding down the freeway. I bet the owner's pissed. Outside the paint's red as the devil when he's wet, and under the bonnet, shit, the devil himself would cream at the power. Brand new everything, and the sound of that engine, the vibration alone makes chicks' clothes fall off. James snorted. Every man under 50 will want that baby, and the bidding will go sky high. Ha, I bet a few babies have been conceived in the back of that panel van big enough to stretch out in. It's a shagging wagon for sure. Alloy wheels, custom paint job, exhaust that you'll feel in your bones before you hear it. As James waxed lyrical about a car Flavia couldn't care less about, her mind drifted into the realm of possibilities. Auctions, bidding wars and maidens. It was perfect. How'd your pub crawl go last week? She blurted out. Did it go off with a bang, like you said it would? Silence for a moment. Finally James said, You mean the one for Davo? I left early. I wasn't feeling the best, so I had one drink, but I went home after the first pub. On Sunday, he'd said he couldn't come over because he'd had a hangover from drinking too much. Flavia smelt a rat. One who wore James' favorite deodorant. Oh. One of the guys at the gym said he saw you with them pretty late. He said you were all drunk. James hesitated for much too long before he let out a shaky laugh that sounded forced. Nah, I was sick. Flu. Liar. When James had the flu, he always called her to take care of him. His flu bouts never lasted less than a week. The bastard had slept with that prostitute, and now he was lying to her about it. Flavia opened her mouth to spit out her accusation. Anyway, gotta go, V, or I'll be late to the auction. See you next weekend, maybe. James ended the call without waiting for her to say goodbye. All good riddance. If James wanted an auction, she'd give him one. A bidding war from every man under 50? Bring it on. She'd make his precious cars look cheap by comparison. 4. Jason climbed into the helicopter, feeling a momentary pang when he remembered the last time he'd flown with Fung. The pilot had told him there was no sex allowed in the helicopter. Well, fuck it, Jason decided. One day he was going to have sex in a fucking helicopter. He was a member of the Mile High Club many times over. That meant special privileges or some shit like that. Fucking helicopter sex at the least. But not with Fung, and not with the pilot either. Morning, Mr. Felix, Cho said easily over his shoulder. Urgent business on the mainland today? Yeah. Need to buy eggs. It's not Easter without chocolate. Cho laughed. What, the Easter Bunny doesn't stop at Romance Island Resort? You should get that hot hotel manager to look into it. If anyone can persuade a busy bunny to rearrange his schedule, it's her. Hot hotel manager? Did he mean Zahn? No rabbits allowed at the resort. The island's an A-class reserve. No pets. Jason stared moodily out the window at the lagoon as they rose above the tree canopy. Pity. I'd pet her though. Sho jerked his chin at the lagoon where someone was swimming. Have you seen her in a bikini? Jason shifted in his seat, unable to stop the image that came to mind. Zan looking hot as hell in a clinging, wet bikini on her veranda. Yeah, she had bigger boobs than he usually liked, but for a moment there, he'd seriously considered. She took me for a snorkeling tour in the lagoon last week. It was hard to keep my eyes on the fish, let me tell you, the pilot continued as he arced around, setting a course for Broome. Mercifully, he shut up about Zan to talk to the tower at Broome Airport about his flight plan. A writhing snake awoke in Jason's belly. How come the hotel manager had taken the helicopter pilot for a tour of the lagoon, but never offered him one? He was the owner of the hotel, for fuck's sake. Shouldn't he be the first to get up close and personal with the fish? The fish. Not the frigid manager with the big boobs. She definitely wasn't his type. What was the pilot saying? There's a chocolate beer at the brewery? Jason interrupted. Sort of. It's a dark lager, but it tastes like chocolate. Stop by while you're in town and have a taste. You'll want more, I swear. Sho laughed. Good thing it's still the wet season. You're my only passenger today, so if you bring back a couple of cases, there's plenty of room in my baby for good beer. He patted the dot. Did you still call it a dashboard when it was a helicopter and not a car? Whatever. Now Sho was stroking it. Jason shrugged. We'll see. Easter eggs and chocolate beer might make for a good Easter weekend. Better than spending it with family. All that sympathy and pity over being fooled by Fung, or at least that's how Jo had put it when she'd insisted he come home for Easter. Mum would worry about him. Dad would mutter something about Sharon Stone and redback spiders, like he usually did when Jason so much as hinted at romantic commitment. All three of them had pleaded for him to return to Perth for the Easter weekend. No fucking way. He'd spend the time alone on his private island paradise with Zan the manager, who was infinitely better company, because she didn't have a sympathetic bone in her body. Nothing cheered him up as much as getting her riled. She was so easy to piss off too. All he had to do was pass out drunk somewhere public. He'd take a fight over pity any day. Maybe he should get her something for Easter. Something for all the staff working the long weekend. After he'd been to the pub though. Chocolate would melt quickly in this tropical heat. The helicopter landed, and Jason headed to the counter to collect the keys to his ride. As he closed the door of his hire car on the humidity, he paused to wonder why he had such bad luck in love. First Angel, then Audra, then Fung. Was he just fucked when it came to women? He could have anyone he wanted for a night, but for more than that, what the fuck was wrong with wanting happily ever after? Didn't rockstars deserve it? Didn't he fucking deserve it? All the chicks in books got happy endings. Why not him? Maybe Zan was right. He needed to find a virgin. He snorted. What was he supposed to do, find some chick who'd never had sex, say, "Hi, I'm J. Felix Rock God. Want to come back to my place so I can pop your cherry?" He'd never looked for a virgin before. Never wanted to, either. Oh, he'd had his fair share of them, but they definitely weren't his favorite. Girls were nervous before their first time and clingy afterwards, neither of which were his style. Nah. Zan couldn't be right. Not with all the other crazy stuff she thought. She told him to drink less and to stop skinny dipping in the lagoon. Both stupid ideas. What was the point in owning an island in paradise if you couldn't get drunk and swim naked whenever you wanted? But to get drunk he needed alcohol, and the best place to get beer was a brewery, so that's where he headed. Jason strode through the beer garden without looking at anything but his destination, the bar. Anywhere else held memories he didn't want to revisit right now. Soon he had a pint of what looked like Guinness but smelled like chocolate in his hand. It slid down his throat like, well, liquid chocolate. Or beer. Because it was both, he set the empty glass on the counter and called for another. The second went almost as fast as the first. It was hot, Jason reasoned, and a man needed to drink a lot to keep from dehydrating. Or melting. Or something. That's why he needed another pint. Cold and smooth and weird how the beer tasted like chocolate. Better have another one to make sure. Why was he here again? Jason peered blearily at the menu board above the bar, but the colored chalk swirls blurred into an unreadable mess. He signaled to the barman. I need to make it 3 cases of this stuff to take home. In my car. Helicopter. He pondered a moment. Didn't Easter have 4 days? No. 4 cases of beer. Don't want to run out. He drained his glass. And 1 more for the road. All too soon, he clunked another empty pint glass on the bar mat. Jason wiped his mouth with the back of his hand and squinted at the stacked boxes beside him. If you're ready to go, mate, I'll help you carry these out to the car, the barman said cheerfully, tipping his trolley up. 8 dozen bottles of beer clinked in their boxes. Music to Jason's ears. Yeah, Jason said, pointing out the door. Cars out there. He ambled down the veranda steps, while the barman wheeled his beer down the ramp. A short time later, when the boxes were secure in the boot of Jason's hire car, he climbed into the driver's seat and fumbled for his keys. You sure you're all right to drive, mate? The barman asked. Jason waved a flippant hand. No worries. I only had a couple. But he wasn't part of a couple anymore, his brain registered foggily. Or even a band. He was a single. The first time he came to this pub he'd been mobbed by girls, but today not a single one had approached him. See how far he'd fallen. From married rock god to lonely loser. Fuck that for a joke. The car's engine roared under his lead foot, as ready to leave the pub behind as he was. The tide was out in Roebuck Bay, bearing creamy sand as smooth as a hot chick's chest. Fuck, he needed to find some action soon if even the bloody beach got him turned on. The supermarket. 5, maybe 10 minutes in the supermarket and he'd be sorted. That's all it would take before some girl's eye would get that excited spark of recognition as she realized she was in the presence of a rock god. That one spark was all he needed, no fan could resist his rockstar charms. He'd take her to a hotel room here on the mainland and give her a night she'd never forget. Fuck yeah. If only he could forget Fung as easily. The sweet frightened girl whose smile lit up his world, or the calculating killer, waiting for her chance to take his life and everything he owned? If she hadn't confessed to the police, he never would have believed it. But now. What was that weird chiming noise? Was there a vibrator in his pocket? How the hell did he get a phone? Oh yeah, there was mobile phone access in town. He'd forgotten his own ringtone, it had been so long since he'd heard it. He cleared his throat, channeling deep and sexy. Hello? Finally. Jay, it's Victoria. Why won't you answer your phone? I've had every major label hammering me day and night to sign you. Band, solo artist, they don't care. All they want is Jay Felix. He'd never been so happy to hear the band manager's voice. His heart leaped and nosedived. The world might think they wanted Jay Felix, but what they really wanted was Angel's music. He was just the front man, the face of the band. Stupid and useless and easy prey for black widows. I don't know. How did his voice come out sounding so weak and weedy? What do you mean, you don't know? Have you found a new agent? Is that what it is? Victoria's voice rose in panic. No, I just can't write songs. Don't think I'm good enough for a solo career. Can't perform without Angel, my muse, telling me backstage she'll kick my ass if I mess up. Can't sing about love when my life's going to shit. A police siren arced up behind him, so loud he couldn't hear what Victoria was saying anymore. Jason glanced in his rear vision mirror, wondering what the idiot had done to be caught by the police. Only, there was no other car to be seen except the police car. Both the driver and passenger were gesturing for him to pull off the road. What the fuck? He wasn't even speeding. Sighing, he slowed to a stop and watched the cop approaching his window. "Gotta go," he said curtly, ending the call before Victoria could say goodbye. "Sir, could you please?" The policewoman stopped and took off her sunglasses. "Oh, it's you." Not the spark of recognition he wanted, but Jason knew how to use it to his advantage. He looked her up and down. There was something seriously hot about a woman in uniform. Especially one with handcuffs. "Having second thoughts, are you? I mean, you did have me handcuffed to a bed last time we met. I won't say no to a little kink with the right woman." Jason winked and was rewarded with her faint blush. "I mean, it's not like I've done anything wrong here." He gestured at the dashboard. "Nothing wrong," she sputtered. "You were driving erratically on the wrong side of the road, talking on your mobile phone. And is that. Are you drunk?" "Nope," he replied cheerfully. This didn't seem to faze her in the slightest. "I'm going to breath test you anyway. You won't get away with drink driving like you did last time." Minutes passed while Jason blew dutifully into the breathalyzer, then repeated the test as the policewoman's brows knitted together. "Happy now?" he drawled. "Absolutely. I wanted to be certain. You have just lost your license for the next 6 months, and when the office processes all this, you'll get another 5 months after that. It could be a year before you're allowed on the streets again." "What?" Jason yelped. "But I'm not drunk. I only had a couple of bottles. Says here that you're 0.082, well over the legal limit. If you like, I can take you to the hospital and let them do a blood test." "Blood?" No, he'd faint. Or throw up. Or both. Rock gods didn't have shameful secrets like being afraid of the sight of blood. "If I agree to go on just the breath test, will you use those handcuffs on me tonight?" He threw in a lazy smile to underline the invitation. Instead of responding, she continued tapping the tablet in her hands as her face reddened. Inwardly, Jason cheered his victory. He knew she had a thing for him. There. 3 fines. 1 for driving under the influence of alcohol, well over the legal limit. 1 for using your mobile phone while driving. And a 3rd fine for not wearing a seatbelt. She triumphantly thrust the papers at his face. "Talking on the phone's illegal now?" He snatched the fines and scanned them. "And it's 60 merit points? How is talking worse than speeding?" "It's not. But with the long weekend coming up, you get double demerit points. So instead of just the dozen you'd get on a normal day, today you get 2 for the price of 1. It's not Easter yet. It's just a normal Friday. Check your calendar, Mr. Felix. The first weekend in March is the Labor Day weekend here. The double demerit period started at midnight last night, like always. You're in Western Australia now." She looked far too smug. "So your plan is to take me to the police station, give me a nice cozy little cell, and keep me captive for the whole long weekend?" From her shocked expression, Jason decided he'd guessed right. He winked. "Bring it on, baby. A bit of kink never hurt anyone. Sounds like a fun weekend. I hope you're wearing hot lingerie under that uniform though, because if I'm going to submit to a policewoman dominatrix, you'd better make it worth my while." She turned on her heel and walked away without a word. Jason rubbed his hands together. One of his fantasies coming true, that was definitely worth losing his license. He could afford to hire a chauffeur to do his driving for him. "Please get out of the car, sir, and give me the keys." Jason stared at the male police officer. "Now, I was just discussing that with your colleague over there. I'd prefer to speak to her." The man laughed. "Yeah, Nelson said that. She also said that you're the first offender who's made her want to deliver a bit of police brutality. So I'm going to use a bit of officer's discretion and give you a lift to the airport, where you can hop on a plane out of here, or you can come with us back to the police station where we'll put you in the cooling-off cell. You can spend the whole weekend surrounded by all the vomiting drunks we pick up over the next 3 days, before she calls the media to tell them who we have in the cells." "Fuck that. Helicopter. "I have a helicopter waiting at the airport to take me back to my island," Jason snapped. "Well, aren't you lucky? A word to the wise then, mate. You might want to stay on that island for a while until Constable Nelson simmered down. The Cape Levesque road's her beat, so staying off the mainland's your best bet to keep your balls, mate. Not that I told you that." Grumpily, Jason shoved his keys at the police officer and climbed out. The policewoman wanted him, he knew it. Not his fault she was too shy to take him up on his offer. Jason maintained his grumpy silence for the short drive to the airport, the wait for Show the pilot to get back from lunch, and the trek across the tarmac to the waiting helicopter. Luckily, he still had the beer. He could get properly drunk later on the stuff. Fuck Easter eggs when you could have chocolate beer. "Pissed off the police in town, have you?" Zahn greeted him as his shoes thumped onto the resort's helipad. Jason shot her a sour look. "How the fuck did you find out?" "Naomi called and said she'd booked you drink driving. I get that you're upset over losing your wife, but you can't go getting drunk in the middle of town first thing in the morning, then drive past the police station and not expect to get caught. Much though I hate to say it, you're better off doing that here until you're not so depressed and—" Sympathy. He could take anything but that. "I am not upset or depressed or feeling any fucking thing at all to do with that lying, murdering bitch. I went to town for a drink and a fuck because I'm a fucking rockstar and that's what rockstars do for fun." Zahn snorted. "Well, Mr. Rockstar, looks like you'll have to find some different fun to keep you occupied." That wouldn't be a problem. He had a whole island almost entirely to himself aside from a few hotel staff, until peak season started and the place would be full of guests again. Boredom and rockstars was like rockstars and celibacy. It just didn't happen. Not in Jay Felix's world. Between his money and his body, Jay could get anything he wanted. Or so he thought. 5. Violet took an inordinately long time reading through the auction description. So long that she made butterflies take flight in Flavia's tummy. What if this turned out to be a terrible mistake? "Don't you think this is a bit extreme?" Violet said. "No. It's justice. We both promised we'd wait. If he's going to throw that all away and pay some girl for sex, then I'm going to do the opposite." Violet frowned. "The opposite would be joining a convent, not a brothel. If you do this, it'll make you a prostitute. A hooker. I'm a working woman already. So are you. We sell the services our bodies provide no matter what job we're doing. My fingers on the keyboard, my mouth to talk to clients, my—" "Yeah, but you're not doing it naked, are you?" Violet interrupted. "This is a lot more personal than booking people's flights. Some stranger will be touching you inside you. Better than James. Now first know where his dick's been." "Have you spoken to him yet?" Flavia nodded. "I asked him about last weekend. Even though he told me last Sunday he had a hangover, now he's changed his story to how he left the pub crawl early with the flu. I know he's lying. And if he's lying to me about this, how many other things has he lied about? How many other girls has he slept with? I can't marry him VI. I can't marry a man I don't trust. So don't marry him. Break off the engagement, call off the wedding and save yourself for someone else," Violet replied, popping a couple of nuts in her mouth. "I don't want to save myself for anyone. The only reason I did was because his family's religious and that's what James wanted. A virgin bride, so that's what I intended to be. Now screw him. Screw his whole family. Not literally, of course. If that hypocrite gets to have sex while I have to stay chaste, to hell with that. I don't want to spend my wedding night in pain. Let some stranger have the dubious pleasure of deflowering me. A man I'll never have to see again." Flavia forced her breathing to slow. "I could just go out and screw the first man I meet in a pub. I could. But this way, it's a statement. It puts a number on just how much James is throwing away." Violet made a derisive sound in her throat. "A price on your body, you mean? You're worth more than however many dollars you get offered for this, insanity, Flavia. I mean, how much do you expect anyone to pay for? What are you offering? One quick fuck? Flavia winced, but she steeled herself into acceptance. Violet was right. Sex with a stranger wasn't making love. It would be one quick fuck. Over and done with as quickly as possible, so as not to prolong her pain. One night with me in a 5-star hotel. I'd walk in a virgin and walk out a woman. It actually sounded tempting when she put it like that. One night? How much do you expect to get for that? Even Julia Roberts in Pretty Woman only got $300. Flavia was ready for this one. I'd say prices have gone up since that movie came out. A model in Brazil auctioned her virginity. For one night some guy paid $800,000. Violet whistled. That sort of money could set you up for life. You could buy a house and still not need to work for a decade. But she's a famous model, I guess, not a travel agent from York. They don't know that. All the info they have is that picture you took of me at Cottesloe Beach last summer. No name, no address, no face, no phone number, even a new email address that I only created today. No one will know who I am. Flavia straightened smugly. I've thought of everything. For that price, what if he wants kinky stuff? Or what if he's some full-blown sadistic psycho who wants to chain you up in his basement? Violet ventured. He'd need to provide a full police clearance. A national one. One that says he's never been charged or convicted for any offense anywhere in Australia. And I'm not going anywhere near his house, basement or no basement. 5-star hotel, remember? In Western Australia. We both signed confidentiality agreements and agreed to have no contact after that night. Simple. Violet bit her lip so hard it bled. Please don't do it. This is crazy. You're crazy. It's 5 weeks before your wedding and you're getting cold feet. That's normal. You and James will work this out and… We won't, Flavia interrupted, slamming her hands down on the desk. But if by some miracle it was his identical twin, lost at birth, who was banging that girl on a table and he can prove it, then I'll call off the auction. A click of a button and it'll disappear. As if to demonstrate, she clicked her mouse cursor on the list item button. The screen blanked, refreshed, and the countdown started. In 10 days, she'd have a buyer for her body. No. Violet reached for the mouse, but Flavia closed the browser before her hand could make contact. Violet's eyes shimmered with tears. What have you done? Flavia lifted her chin. I've taken control of the situation. The ball's in James' court now. When he confesses to his cock-up and explains to me what he was doing, I'll show him the auction. He'll see what a mess he's made, and then I'll tell him he'll have to explain to all our friends and relatives why the wedding's cancelled. I'll call off the auction, he can call off the wedding, the world will know him for the wanker he is, and we can all get on with our lives. Violet burst out laughing. You mean it's all a bluff? You don't intend to go through with the auction? Flavia cracked a smile for what felt like the first time in a week. Shit, no. What if the guy who won was some wrinkly old man who couldn't get it up? I'd die of laughter. James has 10 days to get his ass to my house so I can confront him in person. Violet wiped away tears of what Flavia hoped was mirth. I sure hope you know what you're doing. You keep an eye on that auction and don't let it finish, or you'll have one angry winning bidder on your hands. Flavia nodded fervently. Of course. I can't believe you thought I'd actually do it, Vi. I'd never sell myself. Not for any price. 6. 4. Zahn tried to ignore Jay's shouting as she checked her morning emails. Ooh, good. She had 4 quotes for the new advertising campaign and they were all well under her budget estimate. Better yet, 3 of them were available for filming during the week the resort was closed, so there wouldn't be any issues with guest privacy violations, because there wouldn't be any guests to violate. Or video. Now to decide which company to work with. 4. Something thwacked into a palm tree outside her window, showering the pandanus below with orange, golf ball-sized globes and a flailing rat. Rats. Horrible things. Zahn made a note to email maintenance to arrange for more rat baits. The vermin bred faster than they could kill them. Bloody randy rats. Worse than rabbits. For fuck. Something clattered on the roof. Zahn caught a glimpse of something that caught the sunlight in a silvery shimmer, before it fell past her window and vanished into the undergrowth. Bloody rockstars. Worse than rats, she grumbled as she stalked outside to investigate. The paths around the building were fortunately free of rockstars. Perhaps Jay had finished causing trouble and he'd slunk off to his house to drink himself into yet another stupor. She doubted it though. He wasn't usually that thoughtful. "For," he shouted behind her. Zahn spun but saw nothing until she shaded her eyes and saw the idiot on the hotel roof. "For what?" she demanded. "Dunno," he shouted back. "Stupid golfing jargon. I guess they figure it's more polite than, fucking watch out 'cause there's a speeding golf ball flying at you." Zahn glimpsed a flash of silver. A swish and a thwack sent a white missile off the roof and into the satellite dish. Jay let out a whoop and did a crazy war dance on the roof. Hole in one. "You can't play golf on the hotel roof," Zahn hissed. "You shouldn't even be up there. What if you break a window?" Jay shrugged. "Then I'll have to pay for repairs. They're my windows." He lined up another shot and swung his golf club. The ball arced off the roof and plopped into the water beside the jetty. Jay swore. Another ball sailed across the jungle. It hit the satellite dish with a sharp crack, taking a bite out of it. "Damn it, Jay, stop doing that. No playing golf at the resort. If you want to play golf, fly out to the golf course on the mainland." Like he listened. Jay leaned over, grabbed a handful of balls and lined them up along the roof. "I like playing with my balls right here." "What you going to do about it, Zahn?" he drawled, lifting his club. Thwack. Thwack. Thunk. Fuck. Jay stomped across the roof to retrieve his lost club, but after peering over the edge for a moment decided he didn't need it, and pulled another out of his golf bag. "Mr. Felix? Mr. Felix?" Cam and Seb from IT tumbled out of the foyer door in the world's nerdiest circus act. Jay lowered his club. "What?" "If you break the satellite dish, it'll be weeks before we can get it repaired." Jay shrugged. "So make the call to the repair guy. I'll make my own entertainment." He lined up another shot. "There'll be no adult movies and no internet." The golf club clunked to the roof. "What do you mean?" Jay demanded. "If you break that, there'll be no TV channels at the hotel and no internet access at all. Not for weeks." Seb dropped to his knees. "Please, Mr. Felix. Don't do it." Cam glanced at Zahn before adding his plea. "All the hotel guests will complain if they can't get their channels. We'll be buried in complaints calls. We won't get any work done because all we'll be doing is answering the phone." Zahn snorted. These two might be good with computers, but she didn't believe either of them cared about complaints calls. No, it was the down channels and lack of internet that had them both desperate to stop him. "Can't miss The Simpsons," Jay said, stowing his golf club back in the bag. He jerked his chin at the satellite dish. "I hit it a couple of times already. Is it still okay?" A battered golf bag rolled off the roof and into shrubbery. Jay wrapped his legs around a palm tree that topped the roof. To Zahn's horrified fascination, he slid down the trunk, landing with a thump on the sand. Dusting off his hands, he said, "We should go check." The two geeks followed Jay at what Zahn figured was a respectful distance to the fenced communications compound. Not that a security gate would stop any of them. One swipe of Jay's wrist and the lock unlatched with an audible click. Zahn reached the compound just in time to hear Jay ask, "So did I break it?" "I dunno," Cam said. "Only way I can tell is by checking the connections on a TV or a computer. If I can't get them to work, then it's time to get the repair guy in because only he knows how to fix this." We'll have to call him. Jay shrugged. Let's go watch some TV then. All three of them trooped back into the building while Zahn tagged along, figuring that the manager needed to know whether communications were down because of the idiot owner or not. Seb grabbed the remote and turned on the tiny LED TV in the corner of the IT office. Nobody breathed while the loading screen appeared, then the list of available channels. Glancing at Zahn, Seb deliberately skipped over the adult movie channels to pick one that showed news instead. Good call, Zahn reflected. If she had to watch some silicone-enhanced, spray-tan porn star getting more action than she was, she'd go back outside and smash the satellite dish herself. And just when we thought we'd seen the end of that failed brothel registration bill, an independent senator has vowed to bring in his own bill, outlawing prostitution in Western Australia. This extraordinary pronouncement comes after an Australian girl, calling herself Miss Chastity, chose to auction her virginity online. There's been a massive social media outcry. Some calling her a whore, others proclaiming their support for a girl who wants to get ahead. The price of purity? The auction has only been open for less than a day and the bidding's almost up to $500,000. Senator Sinclair says that there should be laws to prevent the auction from going ahead, or other girls may get the same idea. We cross live now to Senator. God turn it off, Zahn blurted out. She felt sorry for Aussies who'd voted in the recent elections. The politicians they knew had been such a pack of jokers that they'd voted for anyone else to get the idiots out of office. The result had been a bunch of crazies that fought like cats in Parliament. Senator Sinclair was one of the more conservative ones, but that didn't mean she wanted to listen to him. Mercifully, the screen went black. Looks like the uplink's still all right, Cam announced happily. Zahn crossed the room to take a look at the man's monitor. Why wasn't she surprised? The screen showed the search results for Australian Virginity auction. Plenty of text and a plethora of pictures, all showing the same bikini-clad body, minus the girl's head. Men were all alike, show a bit of skin, suggest sex, and you had their undivided attention. Right. If everything's all right then I'll head back to my office, Zahn said, striding out. As her heels ticked across the tiles, Zahn's thoughts strayed to the girl auctioning herself. She wasn't sure whether to feel sorry for the girl or applaud her. On the one hand, she was selling her body, but on the other, she was selling her body for her own benefit. One night as a prostitute and she'd have enough money to buy a house. Or not work for 10 years. One thing was certain, Zahn wasn't the only one missing out on action. Miss Chastity evidently had too. Idly, Zahn wondered if there were any books in the hotel library about virginity auctions. Given the number of romance and erotica books in there had to be at least one. Hadn't Annette been talking about one at breakfast a few weeks back? She hoped it ended well, unlike Jay's last not really a relationship. Zahn decided to detour through the library on her way back to her office. She needed something new to read. 7. So what do you think? Plum or pink? Flavia held up the lipsticks. Violet was so fixated on her phone, she didn't respond. Huffing in annoyance, Flavia snatched the phone. What are you reading? The latest pictures of someone's lunch can't be that important. Violet bit her lip. Have you been checking the auction? Do you know how much money people are willing to pay for one night with you? Shush. Flavia glanced around, but no one looked like they were listening. You're the only person I've told. No one but us and James ever needs to know about this. Violet pinned her with a skeptical stare. Does James know yet? Flavia squirmed. No. Last weekend he had to work both days and this weekend he says he's too busy to drive up too. What about you and your car? Have you forgotten how to drive? Flavia dropped her gaze to her thong-clad feet. No. It's just that I don't want to tell him in front of his housemates or the guys he works with. I get enough whistles and catcalls as it is. I swear Doug only talks to my boobs or my bum. He wouldn't recognize my face because he's never looked at it. If he knew I'd put my body up for auction to the highest bidder, God no. He couldn't afford you. Nobody could. Have you seen the bidding? Violet persisted. Flavia shook her head. It doesn't matter. Not like I'll go through with it anyway. You couldn't pay me enough to. $1 million? Would you do it for $1 million? Flavia snorted. Nobody would pay that much for me. Not yet, but near enough. Look, if you don't believe me. Violet grabbed her phone and swiped the screen into life. There. At last bid, they're offering you one paycheck short of $1 million and the auction still has 3 days left to go. Honey, you have to go see him. Call this whole thing off before it's too late. Flavia felt sick. She'd have to be crazy to turn down that kind of money. What if I don't? Don't see him or don't call it off? Violet held up her hands. Wait, don't answer that. If you have to ask, you're not thinking straight. Get in the car. I'm driving you to Midland. We'll go to the garage where James works. You'll take him aside and talk to him. If I have to chain you both to the petrol pumps until you talk to each other, we're going to get this mess sorted today. For a moment, Flavia tensed for a fight, but the tiny voice in her head that she'd been ignoring for a week piped up that Violet had a point. The sooner James called off the wedding, the better. She relaxed. You're right. Of course I am. For a 40-minute drive, it felt far too short. All too soon, Violet pulled up outside the garage. Flavia took several deep breaths before she exited the car. Striding across the concrete, she held her head high. She wasn't in the wrong here. He'd betrayed her, and he'd bloody well pay for it. At the reception desk, she asked for James. The spotty 16-year-old at the desk nodded and skidded out to the workshop in search of him. Flavia eyed the chairs in the waiting room with longing. She wanted nothing more than to sink into one of them and out of sight, so she could hide from the coming confrontation. My hot little V. What a surprise. Flavia winced at the line from the sordid video. She was no one's hot little V, not anymore. Especially not his. I'd kiss you, baby, but I'm covered in oil. 2 guys called in sick today, so I'm stuck doing routine services and oil changes. Why the surprise visit? James' jaunty grin was the only bit of him that wasn't covered in grease. Even his hair was slick with the stuff. Flavia felt ill. Can I talk to you a minute? In private? Spotty Boy's face fell. Flavia led the way outside. James' shuffling footsteps followed her out to the edge of the forecourt, where the sound of passing traffic should muffle their conversation from the garage full of eavesdroppers. What is it, baby? You getting nervous about the wedding and what comes after? The horrible picture of James pounding that prostitute flashed into the forefront of her mind. Flavia nearly gagged. Yes. No. I mean, it's off. The wedding's off, James. I can't marry you. The dickhead laughed. You are scared, aren't you, baby? Don't worry, we'll make the first time real quick. Sex is nothing to be scared of. It's fucking awesome. You'll see. How would you know? She demanded. He didn't even blink. Everyone knows sex is fun. It'll be just like jacking off, only better. Flavia wanted to wipe the grin off his face with a sander, scraping away skin and muscle and… Like it was at Davo's Bucks night last week, she bit out. His eyes widened slightly. Davo? Nah, that was a pub crawl. I don't remember much of it. I was too sick, remember? Sick was right, but not in the way he meant it. Someone videoed it, James. There's a video on the internet of you with another girl. She couldn't bring herself to say she knew the girl was a hooker. Not me, baby. You know you're the only one I love. The lie tripped off his tongue, followed up by a boyish grin that made him look like a bloody angel. Devil more like. Watch the video, James. Ask Davo about it. He knows. Flavia drew in a deep breath. It's over, James. The wedding's off. You've ruined everything. And you know what? You can call all the guests and tell them. Tell them why we won't be getting married. Baby, be reasonable. I don't even remember what happened that night, James began. You're just overreacting. Must be that time of the month or cold feet, or you just getting scared of losing your V-card. When you calm down, we'll talk about this again. Flavia opened her mouth to shout at him. James held up his hands. No more getting hysterical. Call me when you calm down and want to apologize for even considering canceling the wedding. He winked. You know how to make it all right, baby. But not right now. I have a couple more cars to service before you can service me with that sexy mouth of yours. Go shopping with your friend over there and come back when you're ready to be reasonable. Before Flavia could stop spluttering in fury, James broke into a jog, gave her a jaunty wave, and disappeared into the garage. Flavia stormed back to Violet's car and slammed the door behind her. How'd it go? Violet chirped. He wants me to go shopping with you, rethink things, then come back and apologize before giving him a blowjob. He what? Flavia chewed her lip. Let's go shopping and buy some knives. Then we'll come back and when he whips his dick out. Violet snorted. No, that'll land you in prison too. You can't cut his dick off. Though if you're lucky, he'll catch something horrible from that prostitute and it'll fall off all by itself. She wet her lips. The $1 million auction man isn't looking so bad at the moment, is he? Flavia whipped out her phone and sent James a text message, telling him to call all the wedding guests to cancel the wedding. She wouldn't contact him again until he'd done it. I'm not selling myself short, Vi, she vowed. Not to James or any other man who pays for sex. I'm worth more than that, surely. Vi said vaguely as she pulled out into traffic. For all her brave words, the tiny voice in the back of Flavia's mind taunted her that if James no longer wanted her, who would? Some crazy man who was willing to pay $1 million for one night with her, she reminded herself. Even if she'd never sell herself, it was a comforting thought, she was worth $1 million. 8. Was she imagining it, or did Jay look a little less crazy today? Zahn eyed him from the other side of the pub, wondering whether she should approach him or just leave him to his drinking. He'd fall off his bar stool soon enough without any help from her. She squinted at the drink in front of him, and was surprised to see that he had a beer and not his usual bourbon bottle. Maybe he really was starting to get over Fung. If he wasn't drunk yet, then she should risk speaking to him now instead of later. Weaving between tables and potted palms, Zahn made her way through the jungle to the bar. Magic Marcel was on duty tonight and, true to his name, he produced her favorite drink as if he'd read her thoughts and conjured it into being. The iced ginger beer slid down her throat, leaving behind the faint but familiar burn of alcohol. Or was it the ginger that left her lips tingling? It didn't matter. The local beer was one of the more blissful bits about working in Broome. J. was a blight on her whole bloody day. She'd avoided him for as long as she could, but she knew she had to tell him. If she got it over with, she could enjoy her beer and the rest of her evening in peace. Sighing, Zahn carried her drink to his table. He nodded in way of greeting and continued drinking. He might not be into the bourbon tonight, but that didn't make him any less of an alcoholic. I've booked an advertising company to help raise the resort's profile in the media. A film crew will be here the week we're closed to guests, so they'll be able to take footage of whatever they like. I have 2 airlines already interested in showing the video to all their Australian passengers, and I'm waiting to hear back from 3 more. By Friday Fuck, do you ever stop working? It's after 5. Knock off already. I have. Jay took a deep draught of his beer. Zahn frowned. I thought you might like to know what I'm doing to keep your business in profit. Sorry for thinking you might give a shit. She seized her drink and marched across the pub to a table as far from the wanker as possible. Slumping into a chair, she checked to make sure the potplant jungle hid her from his sight before she pulled out her book. Now she'd told him about the film crew, she had finished work for the day. She could relax and live in a romantic fantasy world that could only exist between the pages of a book, because all real men were bastards. Good girl. A glass clunked on her table and Zahn looked up to meet Jay's approving expression. Is it any good? He jerked his chin at the book. What do you care? Zahn said, snapping it shut. I'm off duty, which means I don't have to deal with your shit. Go away. Go bother someone else. I want to know your opinion. I figure you'll be more honest than most because you don't care what I think about you. He pushed the glass across the table. I even brought a peace offering. What's in it? She peered suspiciously into the drink. If you're trying to drug me. Jay snorted. No idea what's in it. Ask the barman. He made it. He says he knows what you like because you always order the same thing. Iced ginger beer. Zahn sniffed the glass delicately, then folded her hands in front of her on the table. Just hurry up and ask your question so I can go back to my book. That good, huh? Jay grabbed the paperback and flicked through the pages. While she waited for him to lose interest in a book that he couldn't possibly like, Zahn drained the last of her drink. The beer Jay had brought fizzed seductively, the bubbles winking at her through the glass. So you think a girl selling her virginity is a good thing? Zahn almost spat out her drink, but she managed to control herself. Just barely. What? That chick on TV. Now you're reading a book about a girl auctioning herself off to the highest bidder. You think it's a good idea? It's her body. Her choice. Even as she said the words, they sounded hollow. Jay wouldn't let it drop. Would you do it? Bloody hell no. Zahn let out a shaky laugh. Even if I did have my virginity to sell. Did you see how much money that auction's up to now? The only men who have that kind of money are rich, old businessmen who'd have to use Viagra to do the deed. Ugh. Dirty old men in expensive suits, except they'd be out of the suits and, oh, I don't want to think about it. Double-standard Zahn. You think what the girl's doing is fine, but the bloke who helps her do it is a dirty old man by default. For the first time Zahn thought Jason looked angry. What if he's not old? Zahn's gaze strayed to the book Jay still held in his hands. Well, if he was someone she knew, or someone she might normally have a relationship with, without having to be paid for it, or someone she actually wanted. She trailed off, then added, it's the money. Men who pay for sex evidently can't get it any other way. What if he's not paying for the sex? What if he's only paying the money so he knows he'll be her first? He'd be saving her from all the dirty old men, making sure her first time is memorable, all the while knowing that she wouldn't have anyone to compare him to. No prior expectations. Just eager to experience something new, and he'd get to share that with her. The dreamy look in his eyes told Zahn Jay believed every word of the tale he spun. Who was he spinning it for, her or himself? Don't you wish someone had made your first time perfect, Zahn? Don't you think that's what the auction girl's really after, someone to make her feel like she's wanted and valued? Zahn rose. I think I've had enough to drink and it's time for me to go start dinner. She hurried out of the bar before he could follow her. Not that it mattered, he knew where she lived. Maybe she should eat in the staff dining room tonight. The food wasn't that bad, and it had the added bonus that Jay never set foot inside the place. When she reached the path outside without hearing any following footsteps, she slowed down. She'd never tell him, but Jay was right about one thing, a girl did want to feel her first time was special because it wasn't something you forgot. She truly hoped the auction girl got exactly what Jay had described, a man who'd make her first time all that and more, instead of some rich bastard who made her feel cheap even as he paid her $1 million. If only life were like a romance novel. Then she'd know for sure that the girl would get a happy ending. Speaking of happy endings and romance novels, where was hers? Zahn cursed, realizing she'd left it in the bar. If she sneaked back in, maybe she'd be able to retrieve her book without Jay noticing her. Maybe. Zahn retraced her steps and peered through the potted palms, scanning the pub patrons for Jay's unmistakable figure. Ha! He must have left, stumbling out into the dark to pass out under a palm tree again. That'd make retrieving her book so much easier, even if it did mean more trouble tomorrow morning. As Zan approached her table, she realized that the surface gleamed like it had just been cleaned. No empty glasses or books in sight. Sighing, she headed for the bar. "Marcel? Did you pick up the book I left on the table?" Marcel finished pulling a beer and set the pint glass on a tray already half full of drinks, ready to serve. "No, Mr. Felix took it. He said he'd give it back to you." "Wonderful. So Jay was probably going to pass out on her veranda or in her office. Thank God for housekeeping, or she'd have to clean up the mess herself. Unless she kicked him off the veranda while he was still conscious." Zan thanked Marcel and headed home. She managed a smile and a nod for everyone she passed on the darkened path, but she didn't stop to chat. Don't let there be a drunk rockstar on the doormat. Don't let there be a drunken rockstar on the doormat. Oh please don't let there be. She breathed a sigh of relief as she surveyed her rockstar-free deck. Unfortunately, her book wasn't waiting for her either. Bloody Jay. Happy endings would have to wait until someone found him and her book in the morning. Once again, her happiness depended on a man with a reputation for making a bloody mess of things. Wasn't that just the story of her life? 9. You have less than 10 minutes to call me, you rat bastard, Flavia thought, eyeing the auction countdown timer. Now less than 9. Her phone sat on the desk beside her, tempting her to pick it up and call James so she could tell him how much other men thought she was worth. The online news sites had been calling her the $1 million girl for a week now, since the bidding hit 7 figures. It hadn't stopped there, though there'd been no new bids in the last 2 days. Social media had worse names for her, but they didn't know her real name, so it didn't matter. The red numbers stood out against the stark white background, telling the world she was worth a fortune to someone. But not James. They'd been so perfect for each other. Since forever. He'd been her first crush, her first kiss, her first date, her first everything. Now he'd be the first man to break her heart. As the seconds ticked away and her phone maintained its stubborn silence, a splash of water landed on her keyboard, followed by another. Shit, she wasn't crying over that waste of space, was she? Flavia swiped the tears from her eyes and stared at the screen. Now only 6 minutes to go. She had to be crazy to do this. Crazy to give up on the man she loved, the wedding she wanted, and sell herself to the highest bidder. She'd proved her point, hadn't she? Men thought she was worth spending $1 million. And James had thrown all that away with one thrust of his hips. She'd be crazy to go back to him, knowing he'd cheated on her. What kind of lowlife paid for sex? Her phone rang and she snatched it up. Hello? Hope blossomed in Flavia's breast. Why haven't you cancelled the auction yet? Violet demanded. Hope died. I will. I'm just waiting for James to call so first can tell him about it. You mean you haven't told him? I thought that was the whole point of this ridonkulous revenge thing you've got going on here. Violet sighed heavily. Just cancel the crazy thing, will you? Fine. Flavia stabbed the mouse button, telling the website to end her auction. For a moment the screen froze, then reloaded with a pop-up congratulating her on selling her item to someone called Lucky Jason, who had told her it had already notified about his winning bid. Fuck. What is it? I told it to end the auction, so it ended it early and sent a message to the highest bidder. Violet burst out laughing. You're so full of shit, V, I believed you for a moment there. Well, you better believe it, because I'm not joking. Oh fuck, what am I going to do now? You have 2 choices. You can tell the guy you only made the auction as revenge on your boyfriend and get blacklisted forever, or you can go ahead and act like the whole thing's legit and you're going to go through with it. Get him to send you a photo and a police clearance and evidence that he has the money for cash on delivery, like you said in the description. Give him a crazy deadline, like 48 hours. I bet he can't give you all 3 of them. Police clearances take a couple of weeks. Flavia breathed again. All right, I will. I'll see you tomorrow, right? Sure. They said their goodbyes and ended the call. Somebody had won the auction to pay for a night with her. Flavia's stomach roiled. Sex with a stranger. Oh God, what if she couldn't find a way out of it? What if she had to get naked? Let him touch her, let him. She bolted for the toilet just in time to bring up her lunch. She stayed crouched over the toilet bowl, thankful that the rest of her family were out for the day, until she was sure her heaving stomach had nothing left to vomit up. Rinsing her mouth in the bathroom, Flavia eyed herself in the mirror. She didn't look like a prostitute. She looked like a travel agent. The trustworthy sort of girl people wanted to book their flights, tours, accommodation and travel insurance, and be at the other end of the phone to soothe them if something went wrong. Flavia drew in a deep calming breath, or at least it was supposed to be calming. She grabbed a dozen more, in the hope that together they'd have the required effect. She had to email the buyer and tell him that the deal was off. Due to circumstances beyond our control, that particular experience was cancelled. Perhaps Sir would like to book a city tour or a massage at the day spa instead? Hysterical laughter bubbled up in her throat. A man who was willing to pay $1 million for sex probably had his own chauffeur and masseurs. As Flavia sat down at the desk again, trying to compose herself, her phone beeped to indicate an incoming message. She threw the phone on the desk and opened the email on the computer instead. "Dear Miss Chastity," she read. "In anticipation of winning the auction, I had these prepared for you in advance. Please find attached a photograph of me, a screenshot of one of my Swiss bank accounts, a copy of a current police clearance, and details of a booking at a suitable hotel, as well as a flexible flight booking to the nearest airport. If you let me know the date and time of your flight, I will arrange for you to be met at the airport and transferred to the hotel. This time I really think I am. Lucky Jason." She moved the cursor to reply to his email, but her curiosity won. How had he managed to get a police clearance so fast when it normally took weeks? Maybe it was fake. Flavia clicked on the first attachment. Dated the same day as his first auction bid, it looked like Jason had arranged the clearance not long after bidding. And there in police watermarked printout, it said he'd never been convicted of a crime. Just because he wasn't a criminal, didn't mean he wasn't dangerous. Lots of men weren't criminals. Maybe the answer to why he had to pay for sex was in the photo he'd sent. Wetting her lips, Flavia opened the picture. And laughed. Jason had sent her a magazine centerfold of sheer, naked masculine perfection. His man bits were screened by a well-placed guitar, but it was clear the model didn't care he was lolling naked on a beach. Flavia's eyes caressed the lines of hard muscle up to his face, and recognized the man. Not a model, a rock star. He'd sent her a centerfold of J. Felix, the rock star every girl in Australia, no, the world, had a crush on. J. Felix the rock star, darling of millions, having to pay for sex? In whose dreams? She flicked through the rest of the documents, flight and hotel bookings for Broome, before the name of the hotel caught her eye, Romance Island Resort. That was the celebrity place, wasn't it? The exclusive resort that everyone going to Broome asked about, but the astronomical prices were too high for any normal person to pay. She'd seen the brochure picture often enough to know it looked like absolute paradise, with the pristine white beaches fringed in palm trees, enticing you to come and try the jewel-colored waters. If you could afford to swim in an ocean of sapphires and topaz. For a wild moment, Flavia toyed with the idea of accepting the travel arrangements, only to claim breach of contract when she met the man, as he wasn't J. Felix and didn't look a thing like him. What was the man's name again? Flavia clicked on the police document again, and this time, she paid attention to the details. Mr. Jason Kendrick Felix, listed as living at a Sydney address, born the 20th of June. She didn't hesitate. Clicking open her web browser, Flavia searched for more information on Mr. J.K. Felix. 10 minutes later, she laid down her pen and surveyed her hastily scribbled notes. Mr. Jason Kendrick Felix, known by his stage name of J. Felix, was the lead singer of Chaya until they broke up a few months ago. He was indeed born on the 20th of June, and he owned properties in Sydney, Gold Coast and Broome. A hotel in Broome, to be precise, the very romance island resort everyone wanted to stay at. One of the more rabid fan sites offered to give out a phone number, for a price, that fans desperate to meet their idol could contact to apply to work as his personal assistant. The ad implied that the assistance required would be very personal, and quoted some of their happy customers. Flavia's personal favorite was, "OMG OMG OMG, 1NITE sex on beach with J. AMAZEBALLS." This stunning statement was credited to a user who called herself Jay's Cock Sock. Flavia didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Maybe a bit of both. She couldn't deny she'd often wondered what it would be like to get up close and personal with the hot rock star, maybe even fantasized about it once or twice in high school, but to go work for him, take his money just for the chance to sleep with him? It smacked of desperation she didn't understand. Was that why Jay had wanted to buy her virginity? Did he want her as his extremely personal assistant? Personal assistants took care of travel arrangements, appointments and all the tiny details that made life go smoothly for their high-powered executive clients. Much like a good travel agent did. Except bidding on a virginity auction implied, no, screamed at the top of its lungs that he wanted his personal assistant to gratify his sexual whims too. He'd seen her headless photo, so he knew whether her body appealed to him, but did he know what her job was too? Had he somehow stumbled on her identity, and all her efforts at anonymity were shot to shit? What if her boss found out about the auction? Or her family? What if he let slip during one of his press interviews that he'd won the virginity auction, and revealed her identity to the entire world media? Oh God! A rock star had bought her virginity. She'd never be able to show her face in public again. 10. Zahn breathed a sigh of relief. She'd managed to persuade all the staff except 6 essential personnel to take time off at Easter, when the resort was closed. Just her, the 2 IT guys, Jackie from housekeeping, Lee from maintenance and a chef whose name she could never remember. Peter? Patel? Something beginning with P, anyway. She'd considered not approving the IT guy's application to stay at the island during the shutdown, but they'd insisted on the need to install some long-overdue upgrades to the operating system. After several minutes of listening to their spiel on bugs, fixes and a whole lot of technical gibberish that made her tune right out, she gave in just so that they'd stop talking. It was probably best to have some IT staff on the island. After all, if the film crew got into technical difficulties downloading the day's footage, she didn't want to be trying to do tech support. Let the IT guys handle it. A chiseled chest caught her eye moving down the beach, and Zahn cursed. Not 6 people, 7. If rock stars counted as people. Maybe if she hurried, she could catch up to him and persuade him to leave the island for Easter, so she could breathe easily about the film crew. If he passed out drunk in one of the public areas, she'd need more than Jackie and Lee to clean up the mess before the video crew stumbled upon it. On him more like, he'd be right in the middle of the mess. She'd babysat better-behaved toddlers. "Jay," she shouted, moving at a brisk trot along the boardwalk until her shoes sank into the sand. "Jay, I need to talk to you." He slowed, turned and spread his arms in an open invitation. Did he seriously expect her to hug him? Jay evidently didn't realize the geeky IT guys were more her type. As Zahn drew closer, she realized that his broad smile wasn't his usual smarmy one, with the slightly raised eyebrows and that look in his eye that said the lurking sex maniac would surface the moment he smelled desire in the water. Or the forced one he adopted when his sister Jo called. Instead, he looked positively cheerful. Let it mean that he had plans for Easter which would take him far away from here, she prayed to any deity listening. "What are you doing for Easter?" she blurted out, crossing her fingers. "Why? Are you planning on asking me out for a dirty weekend, Zahn?" He laughed. "I never would have believed it, but to hear it from your own lips." He had that wicked look in his eyes again, the one he got when he was teasing his sister. Like he knew he was a shit-stirrer and he was just saying things to get her to explode. "Don't be ridiculous," she snapped. For a moment, she wished he'd look hurt or something. Did nothing dent his monstrous ego? "I'm asking because the film crew will be here on Good Friday and they're filming over the weekend." I need to know you'll behave yourself and not do anything stupid while they're here. It costs a lot of money to shut the hotel down for a week of filming, and I don't know when we'll be able to do it again, if at all. We can't have them here when the place is full of guests because of the hotel's reputation for privacy." She took a deep breath. "You'll barely see me, I promise." He laughed again, as if at a private joke. Zahn turned his words over in her head. "I'll barely see you because you'll be off the island enjoying yourself somewhere else, or I'll barely see you because you're going to pretend the island is a nudist colony so you can show off your bare ass." He looked smug. "Oh, my ass will be bare all right, along with the rest of me. I'm having a friend over for the Easter weekend, and we'll probably spend most of our time inside my villa. We'll be much too busy to even notice your camera crew." "Another mail-order bride? Did you get a Russian one this time?" The words were out before Zahn had thought them through, and she regretted them instantly. Now she'd hurt him. Jay's voice was chilly and distant. "No." He started to walk away. Zahn considered doing the same, but couldn't bring herself to do it. Instead, she hurried to catch up to him. "I'm sorry. That joke was in poor taste. I shouldn't have said it. But whoever she is, if you don't know her all that well, at least make sure you've done a security check on her first. I don't want—" Actually, she couldn't quite work out what she didn't want. Him killed? She wanted to strangle him almost daily, but she didn't want him dead. Jay's eyes looked more human than she'd ever seen them as he stared directly at her. For a second, she could have sworn he was just a man and the rock star didn't exist. "Yeah, me neither." Zahn had never heard his tone sound so soft. He lifted his chin in that peculiar way guys did instead of nodding like normal people. "I'll call the band's security consultant and get him to check her out." Chaya had a security consultant? Or they did have. Normal bands had managers and groupies and roadies and maybe PR people, but what sort of band had a security consultant? Maybe all the big ones did and no one talked about it, Zahn mused, deciding to ask Dennis from security about it when he got back from leave. Not until after Easter though. Maybe when the girl arrived, she'd call the guys at Broome police station to run a quick check on her too. The last thing she needed for the photo shoot was a murder scene. If Zahn wasn't going to kill Jay Felix over the Easter weekend, then no one else was allowed to either. 11. Violet threw herself on Flavia's bed. "So, what excuses has the dirty old man come up with for why he couldn't get all your documents to you in time?" "None. They were in my inbox within 5 minutes of the auction ending. Everything. Even a signed confidentiality agreement." Flavia swallowed. "And there's more. He wants a police clearance from me to make sure I'm not a murderer, he says." Her laughter sounded slightly hysterical. Violet evidently didn't notice, because her giggling sounded sane. "Well, there's your way out. It'll take you weeks to get one, and Easter's less than a week away." Flavia shook her head. "They say that, but it only takes weeks if they have to check old records and stuff. I've lived my whole life here in York. Sergeant Ford had it ready for me in less than an hour." "He won't know that, your would-be punter. Just point him to the police website." "Weeks," Violet insisted. "It won't work. I think he knows who I am. I think he wants me to work for him." Flavia's voice died so that the last words came out in a strangled whisper. "You have a job. One you're good at. Why the hell would he think you want to become his permanent mistress? The auction was for one night. One time. Say you can't. Say you got drunk last night and slept with someone you met at the pub. Really get drunk and pick up some bloke at the pub." Panic widened Violet's eyes. "You can't seriously be thinking of going through with it." Flavia swallowed. "I checked the confidentiality agreement. The only way I can guarantee he can't talk about me is if I go through with the auction. No deal, and he can tell the world my name and where I live." Violet shook her head. "You can't. You just can't sleep with some wacko stalker." Some reclusive psycho who just happens to be able to afford to spend $1 million to sleep with a virgin. Is he some sort of oil baron from the Middle East? An American business tycoon with a fetish for all sorts of kinky stuff? Or some aging rock star souped up on Viagra because he's had so much sex his downstairs is all worn out? Flavia cracked a smile. He's not any of those things, though you're close with the last one. Violet screwed up her face in concentration, then smacked her hand against the bedhead. You'll have an agreement about no kink, right? Make sure it says no performance-enhancing drugs, or any drugs at all. No Viagra, no hard-on, no worries. J. Felix didn't need Viagra or any other drug to make girls happy. Dozens of his happy bed partners had told the media that much and more. The gory details had made Flavia blush until she couldn't take it anymore, so she'd stopped searching the internet for the rock star who wanted to take her virginity. No, who wanted to pay her a premium so she'd give it to him. Would that be so bad? I don't think it'll be that easy, Vi, Flavia said. Even if it is, I'll still have to show up at the hotel so we can both sign it before if we do it. She couldn't bring herself to describe the deed aloud. Violet enveloped Flavia in a fierce hug. Don't worry. You'll find a way out of this, and you'll come join us in Bali for the hens trip turned girls trip of your life. We'll laugh about this over cocktails at the hotel bar. Talk about happy hour. It'll be a whole happy week. You'll see. And with that they said their goodbyes, leaving Flavia alone with her thoughts, which naturally turned toward the irresistible naked man lying on a beach in her inbox, who wanted to pay her $1 million for one night. Other girls would be willing to pay him that for 15 minutes, if the tales were true. If that picture was accurate. Flavia slid onto her desk chair, bringing her computer back to life so she could search for images of rock god J. Felix. Always grinning, always sexy, sometimes winking, rarely wearing a shirt, and even if he did have a shirt or jacket, he wore it wide open. Chiseled abs glistening with, well, it was hard to tell. Her first guess would be sweat, but in some of the photos it looked more like oil. Idly, she wondered how much they paid the makeup artist who got to oil him up in preparation for the shot. She could imagine a line of volunteers forming every time that shirt came off. What would it feel like to spend a night with a man who had a body like that? A body he knew how to use to make a woman feel wanted, if his reputation as a legendary lover could be believed. The thought hit her like one of the trucks barreling along the highway. Would it be such a bad thing to lose her virginity to J. Felix? 12. At 7 on the dot, Zahn heard splashing. Don't you own any pants? She shouted. Good thing there were no guests left at the hotel to see, what with them being officially closed for the week and all. Not like that had ever stopped him before. Jay merely grinned and waved as he stroked his way across the lagoon on his back. Even with his bits on display, Zahn couldn't take her eyes off him. What unfeeling deity wrapped the quintessential wanker in such perfect packaging? One look and she craved bacon. The taste of salt from the sizzling hot flesh on her tongue, not the bowl of cardboard cereal currently sitting on the bench, waiting patiently for its milk. Maybe it was time to cave to the pressure and buy herself some sex toys from one of the online shops. Watching him every morning only made her crave company more. A battery-operated boyfriend, like the American romance heroines all seem to have. It's not like she needed any other bit of a man to satisfy her. More splashing as Jay did a lap of breaststroke, sticking his Adonis ass in the air with every kick. She didn't need this kind of temptation right now, least of all from him. You know the lagoon's full of sharks, she hollered. They like biting soft flesh. She watched in satisfaction as he flipped from his front to his back again. Not mine, he called back. Besides, how am I supposed to get into shape and work on my tan when half of me's covered up? Got to look my best for my friend arriving this arvo. Bloody Australian slang. It's afternoon, you idiot. Nope. Still bright and early in the morning. You're still in that see-through t-shirt you love to sleep in, watching your favorite breakfast show before you dig into your cereal. We both know you love watching me swim, Zahn. Jay laughed as he swam out of sight. Zahn's hands balled into fists, ready to smack him. He could see her shirt from that far away? Hang on, see through her shirt? Shit. She'd better wear a darker shirt tomorrow morning then. How many mornings while she'd been perving on him had he been laughing at her boobs? Bloody rockstar. He was a plague on this otherwise perfect island. A blight. A curse. She watched him rise from the water still stark naked and walk past her window. He waved jauntily before heading into the jungle, his ass swinging with every step. Stop looking. Stop looking at him, damn it. That's what he wants. A clump of pandanus hid him from sight, bringing Zahn back to her senses. Breakfast. Then she had a whole day of work ahead of her before she could knock off for the rest of the long weekend. She couldn't forget the film crew either, their flight would arrive just after lunch. The approaching storm would be gone by tomorrow morning, revealing blue skies over the picture-perfect paradise that was Romance Island Resort. That brought the smile back to Zahn's face. Even with the odd rock star rat, she still had the best job in the world. 13. You take care of yourself in the city tonight. Don't you back down on a single one of the conditions we wrote into the contract. The lecherous old man will call off the deal and all this will be over. Get the hell out of there and call me the minute you arrive at Denpasar Airport, all right? Violet enveloped Flavia in a fierce hug. Promise? Flavia forced a smile as she nodded. Part of her wanted to tell Violet that she wasn't going to a city hotel to meet some old man at all, but meeting her would be deflowerer? Was that even a word? Whatever he was, she'd meet Jay or the man pretending to be him at Romance Island after landing at Broome Airport in a few hours' time. This whole mess might be over and done with before Violet and the other girl's plane landed in Bali. It had to be. If Flavia had one more sleepless night like the last few, she'd go certifiably crazy. If she hadn't already. Jay Felix, with his far too perfect body, had invaded her dreams and a large proportion of her waking thoughts too. She didn't dare tell Violet that she'd considered going through with the deal, conditions or not. Or that most of the conditions were a list of all the things she'd already done with James. Well, not the kinky stuff obviously, but anything up to actual sex. She was a virgin, not a nun. And she suspected Jay would be a million times better than James at making her heart race. She only had to close her eyes and she could almost feel Jay's hands on her, sending her soaring to undreamed of heights. Violet didn't seem to notice her distraction. Au revoir then. And with a wave, she vanished through the departure gate. Flavia waited a few seconds until she was certain Violet was out of sight before she headed outside. Instead of taking a taxi to the city, she wheeled her case over to the shuttle that transported passengers between the international and domestic terminals. Oh, she had a whole suitcase of clothes in the boot of her car for Bali, but that could stay there until tomorrow. She wouldn't need any more clothes except the change in her overnight bag where she was going. If she needed clothes at all. A vision of having sex on the beach with Jay as the sun set over the tropical ocean made her feel all warm inside. At least until she realized that the shuttle driver was shouting at her that they'd reached the terminal. Blushing furiously, Flavia stumbled off the bus. It wasn't until she reached the terminal doors that she realized she'd been dragging her case along the side without wheels. She quickly flipped it around, hoping no one had noticed. Anyone would think this was her first time on a plane. She was a travel agent for God's sake. A professional who knew the travel industry inside out. Throwing her shoulders back, Flavia marched through the automatic doors and joined the check-in queue. Whatever her evening held, she'd face it head-on like the professional she was. A travel agent and not a sex worker, she reminded herself. Her boarding pass told her she had the window seat she'd requested, bringing a smile to her face. Her case was small enough to qualify as carry-on luggage, so she strode past the luggage drop-off counters with a scornful glance at all the tourists who packed way too much. One man had so many cases they threatened to fall off his luggage trolley. Watch out! The warning came too late. Flavia tripped over the wheels of a second overloaded trolley, and flew forward to prostrate herself on the airport carpet. Are you okay? Flavia jumped to her feet, smoothing her dress and hoping she hadn't flashed her knickers to the whole airport terminal. "Fine. I'm fine," she snapped at the man who didn't look much older than she was. "You should watch where you're going," he said, shoving his trip hazard trolley closer to the luggage scales. "So should you." Without another word, Flavia tilted her suitcase and set off for the departure lounge, biting back the name she wanted to call the overpacked idiot. She hoped the airline charged him a fortune for the excess baggage and lost half of it in transit. No one needed that much stuff for a holiday. She sailed through security with no problems, dodging between the Minnesite staff taking off belts, shoes and watches to make it through the metal detectors without beeping. There was a slight delay when the security officer decided to check her for explosives, but Flavia gritted her teeth and endured the vacuuming of her shoulder and bag before the board guard gave her the all clear. Finally, Flavia ascended the escalator to the departure lounge and surveyed the sea of fluorescent yellow and orange. It was evidently shift change day at many of the mines. She'd heard about this, but it was different to be one of the drab passengers caught in the crush of high-visibility site uniforms. She'd never thought a simple grey dress could stand out so much. Oh well. So much for blending in. Flavia found her gate and threw herself into one of the plastic seats. Air hissed out of the thin vinyl cushion beneath her in a sigh she felt like echoing. To distract her from the upcoming ordeal when she landed, Flavia flipped to a random game on her phone that quickly absorbed her attention. The calming sequence of matching, moving and making pieces disappear occupied her so completely that the boarding call for her flight took her by surprise. Flavia stared at the time displayed on her phone. Yes, she'd been sitting there for almost an hour while her butt cheeks grew numb against the unforgiving plastic. She wanted to rub the circulation back into them, but she was hardly going to do that in front of a terminal full of men. Instead, she tried to ignore the tingling as she joined yet another queue. "Enjoy your flight," the flight attendant said as she passed Flavia her scanned boarding pass. With a nod, Flavia moved down the aerobridge, hearing the sibilant hiss of her case wheels on the carpet as the sounds of 1,000 conversations in the terminal faded. Another smiling attendant pointed out her seat, and Flavia trundled her case to her place for the next couple of hours. With her phone switched off and her case in the overhead compartment, Flavia drummed her fingers on the armrest, already bored and wishing she could start watching the in-flight movie early. This plane didn't have screens on the seatbacks, so it must be one of those old ones with ceiling screens that descended when the flight crew decided it was time. Wonderful. Flavia grabbed the in-flight magazine and started flipping through the pages. A night of spectacular sex, or should she call off the deal? She wanted Jay. All those pictures on the internet invading her dreams. Even her fantasies featured him this week. If the rumors were right and he truly was the legendary lover his fans claimed him to be, one night would never be enough. She'd want more. Not just one episode but the whole damn season. And the next and the one after that. She should call off the deal. Tell him she'd changed her mind. Or she could have one night with a rockstar. Enough to fuel erotic dreams for the rest of her life. And the money to travel wherever she wanted for a couple of years. The deal didn't look so bad viewed from that angle. Flavia scrubbed her hands across her face, trying to blot out the image of her twined around Jay's luscious body, all hard muscle and gleaming. We meet again. Flavia glanced up and met the eyes of her trolley assailant. She pressed her lips together, sending up a fervent prayer that he'd go away. And we're seatmates? Isn't that great? Her eyes told him to die, but he ignored her as he shoved his bags in the overhead locker before sliding into the seat beside her. I'm Tim. He stuck his hand out for her to shake. Flavia felt an overwhelming urge to bite his hand. Hard. Instead, she managed a polite handshake as she told him her name. Damn all her good manners. You going to Broome on business? He asked. The sex trade. Lucrative business like you wouldn't believe. Flavia coughed, then cleared her throat to cover the hysterical laughter that threatened to escape. No. Just visiting a friend. You're all dressed up for your friend. Boyfriend, I take it? No. Too late, Flavia tried to cover up her slip. Just a friend. I want to make a good impression is all." Tim grinned. "Online romance? You picked one hell of a tourist destination for a first date. Be careful where you sit on the beach to watch the sunset, or you'll have 100 people taking pictures of you as you become an internet sensation." Kissing couple on Cable Beach, silhouetted against the sunset. Flavia's blood ran cold. The video of James and his hooker had gone viral, so it had popped up in her social media feed more times than she could count, with captions like "Best Man Ever" and "Bucks Night Booty." She never wanted that sort of fame. That's why she'd made the auction as anonymous as possible, so that by the time Jay learned her name, if he didn't already know it, he'd already signed the confidentiality agreement. "I'll keep that in mind," she said colorlessly. She paused for a moment before she recalled her manners. "Are you going to Broome for a holiday too?" Tim laughed so hard he shook the seat. "Hell no. This is a work trip. Me and my partner, we're filmmakers, and our media company scored a contract to do some PR for one of the big Broome resorts. Filming for their new ad campaign. It's the biggest contract we've ever had, so Simo didn't want to leave anything behind. Every camera we own, tripods, extra lenses, filters, all the cases barely fitted in the car, but he wouldn't hear of leaving it. The resort's paying for it, he said, so why not?" Flavia's icy disapproval defrosted slightly. "And here I thought you only brought all that luggage so you could mow down unsuspecting fellow passengers." Tim shrugged. "I said I was sorry." Flavia couldn't recall hearing anything of the sort, but then she'd been too embarrassed and angry to want to listen to a word he said downstairs anyway. And now she was stuck sitting next to the man for the next few hours. She imagined him as one of the difficult clients at work, perhaps one of the farmers who'd missed his flight and wanted someone to shout to about it, so all she could do was stay calm until the ordeal was over. "Apology accepted," she said graciously, or at least that's what she was aiming for. The flight attendant interrupted the silence to demonstrate the plane's safety features, which saved Flavia the need to say any more. When the woman finished and her seatbelt and life jacket were safely stowed away, Flavia ventured, "I wonder what the in-flight movie will be today." Tim surveyed the plane. "Don't think there'll be one. No screens. They usually switch them on for the safety briefing. Probably a good thing. I've seen all the decent movies out at the moment and there's none I'd want to see again. I wonder what it takes to get your film approved for release on in-flight entertainment? I bet they wouldn't tell me if I asked though." Flavia's polite answering smile seemed to be enough to unlock the floodgates. Tim told her about his and Simo's online video channel, the series of indie films they'd created in and around Perth, and the challenges of making it big in a world where everyone had cameras on their phones, and the videos that went viral were more about being in the right place at the right time than any skill on the part of the person holding the camera. But all that would change after this job, because they'd have the money to film the first season of their series when the check came in. Flavia nodded and made understanding noises as Tim gave her a blow-by-blow account of the plot of their proposed 6-season series. It sounded like a mashup of every one of James' favourite TV shows, including the Aussie soap operas he watched religiously every night, though he'd deny it at the top of his voice if anyone even suggested he watched that soppy crap. City buildings gave way to red dust, which transitioned to ancient weathered rock as they flew north. All too soon, clear skies gave way to stormy turbulence as clouds shrouded them. As if to deepen the gloom, the pilot announced their approach into Broome Airport. Flavia tightened her white-knuckled grip on the armrests as the jet bumped onto the tarmac before grinding to a halt. Hot, humid air gusted into the cabin, smelling of iron-tainted mud. Tim and the other passengers hurried out of the plane, but she took her time, dragging her bag from the locker and wheeling it slowly down the aisle. She was the last passenger off the plane, but standing at the top of the steps, she wished she'd stayed longer. The tropical air wrapped around her face like a hot plastic bag. How could anyone breathe in this humidity? "There's air conditioning in the terminal," the flight attendant said, pointing. Flavia clattered down the metal stairs to the tarmac, feeling the heat radiating through her shoes. She moved at a brisk trot, hoping the soles of her sandshoes wouldn't melt. There was indeed some form of air conditioning in the terminal building, but even that struggled to push back the humidity. Or perhaps it was the crush of people, both those who had just disembarked from the plane, and the families and friends who had arrived to greet them while they waited impatiently for their luggage. The baggage carriers were still unloading the plane and taking their time too. Working hard in this heat couldn't be fun. Flavia wove through clumps of people, careful not to run over any toes with her bag, until she found herself outside again in a blazing sauna by herself. Bugger. Miss. She turned and met the gaze of an Asian man, who rose from his shady seat behind a potted palm tree. He definitely wasn't Jay. Can I help you? Flavia shook her head. I'm supposed to wait for someone to pick me up. Then you should go back inside. That's where everyone meets because it's cooler. He grinned. Jay wasn't inside. Flavia was certain of that. She hadn't seen a screaming mob surrounding a man signing autographs or playing air guitar or whatever else rock stars did to work a crowd into a frenzy. No dodgy-looking blokes in hats and sunglasses either. Well, at least not lurking by themselves. Perhaps she should go inside and look again. The other hotels make their drivers hold tacky signs with people's names scribbled on them. The resort has a different clientele. People who don't want their names up there for the general public to see. His knowing look made Flavia feel uncomfortable. How much did he know about her? The man was wearing knee socks with shorts and a button-through cotton shirt, like an overgrown schoolboy. Talk about creepy. Romance Island Resort, she asked, hoping he meant some other resort. Maybe one of the expensive ones at Cable Beach. The very same. He eyed her. You're my only passenger today. Is that all your luggage? Flavia balked. Yes, that's all my luggage. Look, I'm here to meet Mr. Felix. I'm not stupid enough to get into a car with a man I don't know, who might have plans to murder me and dump my body in the desert. Unless you can give me some ID to prove you're a driver for the resort, I'm not getting into any car with you. To Flavia's surprise, the man laughed. I'm not a driver. I'm a helicopter pilot. And my baby is on the other side of that hangar. He pointed at a shed just inside the airport fence, then pulled out his wallet. Here's my pilot's license if you don't believe me. Flavia peered at the card. Show you Matsumoto, she read slowly. What's a Japanese pilot doing in Broome? He laughed so hard his hand slapped his knees. It's show. Like the shoe on your foot. You've never been to Broome before, have you? Japanese men built the pearling industry and most of the town here, before they were all locked up in World War II. Most of them never came back, but my grandfather's family did. I've visited relatives in Japan, but for generations of my family, like me, Broome is home. The pearls keep us here and I hope they always will. Slowly, Flavia started to walk toward the shed. So you're a pilot or a pearler? Some women think I'm a right pearler all right, but Mr. Felix's girls have eyes for no one but him, so I'll just be your pilot today. He sounded sad. Girls? Mr. Felix has lots of girls? Flavia blurted out, knowing his reputation but wanting it to be wrong. She'd just be another conquest for him. An unusual and expensive one, but that's all. Her heart sank, begging her on its knees not to go through with the deal with Jay. I'm sure he has as many as he wants, but I've only flown 2. 3 if you count his sister, and 4 with you. He looked like he wanted to say more, but his lips closed firmly until a helicopter came into view. There's my baby. He keyed in his access code on the gate and it grated open, allowing them to cross from car park to airside. Flavia's suitcase bumped along behind her. You can sit in the co-pilot seat if you like, Joe said. Just as long as you don't touch anything. Best view in the house. Flavia accepted his offer and climbed into the front of the bubble-like helicopter cabin. The overhead blades whirred into life so loud she could barely hear herself think. Perhaps that was a good thing. Can you tell me about Jay's other girls? She shouted. Sho shook his head, tapped his headset and held out another headset to her. She slipped it over her head and repeated her question into the tiny microphone. No, I can't, he said, then paused to speak to the control tower. When he was done, he added, "Romance Island Resort is special. What happens at the resort stays at the resort. It's what the guests expect of an exclusive place like that. There's no place like it." Flavia wasn't sure whether she felt elated or alarmed. On the one hand, if she slept with Jay, no one would ever know. On the other hand, if the man was dangerous or not Jay at all, and she tried to back out of the deal, did that mean he could get away with hurting her? What if something illegal happens there? Show's eyes darted from his instrument display to the sky above, as he lifted the helicopter into the air, and started to spiral slowly upward. Then it's reported to the hotel manager, who liaises with the police. Nothing happens on the island without Ms. Lane knowing about it. If you're thinking of doing anything illegal at the resort, I recommend you don't. She knows every police officer in town and she'll send me to pick them up. You don't want to cause trouble at Romance Island Resort. No, she didn't. Flavia felt a tiny bit safer. What's the resort like? Sho leaned back in his seat, suddenly relaxed. Romance Island is one of the most beautiful islands I've ever seen. Incredible beaches, a lagoon where you can snorkel for hours, and the sunsets. If you can, try and find a nice spot on the beach to watch every sunset and dawn too if you're up early enough. There's no place like it in the world. He flew over the town, the beach, and through the blanketing cloud cover to clear skies. Soon all Flavia could see was ocean, red rock and vegetation desperately clawing a life out between the two. Flavia watched it all slip past through her curved window, her thoughts seesawing between whether she should or she shouldn't. It depended on Jay. Or the man who might or might not be Jay. God, when did this all become so complicated? She should have just gone to a pub and gone home with some bloke for the night. Wham bam, thank you. But no, she wouldn't have done that either. Now she might as well make the most of the opportunity. Whatever it held. There's the island coming up now. Sho pointed. Flavia peered at the blue heart, the lagoon Sho had mentioned, rimmed with red rock, white sand and a surprising amount of green. Buildings nestled among the trees, roofed in light green that made them blend in with their surroundings. As if the entire island was uninhabited. The only clearly visible man-made structure was a patch of paving, marked with a ringed H, the helipad. Sho circled the island, dipping lower as he approached the landing spot. Flavia watched as a figure flew out the door of a building and pelted down the path to the helipad. A woman, she decided, as the helicopter settled on the ground. A woman who didn't look happy at all. In fact, her expression rivaled the storm clouds over town. Sho didn't seem to notice. He grinned and waved cheerfully at her. "There's Ms. Lane herself come to greet you. You enjoy your stay now." Flavia cracked open the door. Meeting the hotel manager was hardly a problem, when compared to what would happen later. 14. The sound of the approaching helicopter alerted Zan. She was halfway out the door before she realized she still had her coffee in her hand. She set it on the unoccupied reception desk and crossed the foyer to the door. The film crew were finally here. Yet when she reached the helipad, she couldn't see anyone but Sho with some girl in the co-pilot seat. No sign of Simon or the other guy she'd spoken to during their video calls. Or any of the essential equipment they'd insisted on bringing and charging her for. Well, the hotel's budget was her responsibility, and what did it matter? Who was this girl and where were her cameramen? When the girl reached the open gate, Zan stuck out her hand. "Zan Lane. I'm the manager of Romance Island Resort." Zan gave the girl credit. She smiled and had a surprisingly firm handshake. "I'm here to see Mr. Felix," she said. "Are you now?" "Yes," she said pleasantly. "If you could tell him I'm here, please." Zan almost admired her. "What name shall I give him?" A faint blush appeared across her cheeks. "He's expecting me." No guest stayed at her hotel without giving suitable identification. Not even Jay's guests. "Are you a mail-order bride?" Zan demanded. The girl's shock left her mouth hanging open. "No." "A groupie? A fan?" An ex-staff member? Zahn pressed, watching the girl's eyebrows draw down in annoyance. No. Not that it's any of your business, but I'm a travel agent. And I'm here as Mr. Felix's guest, so unless you want me to warn my clients away from your hotel, the girl trailed off ominously. So Jay's banging travel agents now? Zahn was shocked to see the girl's face flame red, but she pressed her advantage. Did he pick you up in town on his last trip? I've never met him before, the girl protested, then bit her lip. Not a mail-order bride. Not a groupie. What did Jay need a travel agent for? He lived in a damn resort and refused to leave. A girl who hadn't met him and blushed furiously at the mention of sex. No. He couldn't be that stupid. Not even Jay would bid on that girl's virginity auction, surely. Follow me to reception. I'll get you checked in and make sure you have access to the guest facilities, Zahn said, turning on her heel to head back to the hotel. She heard the girl's footsteps and trundling wheels follow her. Zahn slipped behind the desk as if she processed guests every day. Right name? She poised her hands over the computer keyboard. And I'll need to see some ID plus your police clearance. The girl opened her mouth to argue. Hundreds of backpackers had tried and failed. Zahn cut her off before she started. Your details are kept confidential, but we need them for legal reasons. If you go swimming in the lagoon and don't come out, we need your details to file a missing persons report with the local police. Now ID and police clearance, or you'll have to get back into that helicopter, because you can't stay here without correct identification. Reluctantly, the girl extracted her wallet and handed over her driver's license. Further fossicking in her bag produced a document folder from which she pulled a crisp police clearance. There. Miss Flavia Lancaster? From York? Zahn inquired, trying not to sound gleeful. She was dying to ask the girl why she'd set up the auction, but she restrained herself. Everything seems in order. Zahn grabbed one of the VIP wristbands and set it in the scanner. Okay, this will give you access to Jay's villa and all of the shared guest facilities. Kitchen hours are limited this week, but Jay should have the times on his room service menu. Any questions? She passed the wristband across the counter and watched the girl. No, Flavia put it on. Flavia shook her head. Does Jay know I'm here? Zahn shrugged. He probably heard the helicopter. I'll call him and let him know. She reached for the reception desk phone, then changed her mind. I'll be right back. She headed for her office and closed the door before dialing the number for Villa Penguin. Zahn. Are you finally asking me on a date? Jay laughed. For once, Zahn had one up on him. No. Your date for tonight just arrived, complete with her clean police clearance. Miss Chastity. She held her breath, waiting for him to confirm her suspicions. Wishing he wouldn't. She's here? Jay Felix, rockstar and the biggest idiot this side of the sun, had bought a girl's virginity. Zahn's already low opinion of him dropped an extra kilometer. Send her over. And have a repeat of Fung's flight? Not bloody likely. I'll bring her to your villa, Zahn snapped. And you'd better have clothes on this time. Oh come on, Zahn. Clothes are overrated in this heat. Zahn didn't deign to reply. Instead, she hung up and headed back to Flavia. He knows. I'll take you to his place now. Flavia gave a curt nod and gestured for Zahn to lead the way. Zahn wondered whether the girl's confidence was faked or whether she had no qualms about selling her body to the highest bidder, whoever he might be. Did she have no conscience or doubts at all? Zahn wouldn't, ever be able to march so calmly to the house of the man she'd sold herself to. She'd been a ball of nerves on the helicopter here, and her job wasn't half as daunting as prostitution. Or first-time sex. The rain had stopped for the moment, though steaming puddles still stood on the paths. Flavia's suitcase wheels hissed as they parted the tiny seas, all the way to Villa Penguin. Flavia hesitated at the steps, but Zahn kept going, right up to Jay's front door, which she rapped on. Jay, your visitor's here. Zahn called through the frosted glass. The door would open and Zahn moved aside so that Jay could see Flavia. And so she could see them both. Flavia's eyes grew as round as her open mouth until she swallowed and seemed to get a hold of herself. Shakily she climbed the steps, bumping her suitcase up behind her. Jay's easy smile was already in place. So were his shorts, fortunately, though that's all he wore. Better than nothing, Zahn supposed. "Come in," he said, his voice so deep he was almost purring. Bloody tomcat, Zahn thought. "You can go now, Zahn," Jay said, making shooing motions. Zahn's eyes darted to Flavia. Was it safe to leave this inexperienced girl with Romance Island's Romeo? "Thank you. It was nice to meet you," Flavia said. Without another glance at Zahn or Jay, she headed past him into the house. Jay winked at Zahn before letting the door close between them. Zahn debated whether to stick around to make sure the girl was all right, or leave before the sounds of sex started. Listening to Jay Felix have sex with a girl he'd paid for the privilege? Ugh, no. Zahn headed back to her office. Only a few hours left before her long weekend started, and she was still waiting on that film crew. Where were they? 15. Oh God. It really was him. Jay Felix. He was hotter in person than in his pictures. Her mouth watered at the thought of running her fingers down those muscles, before pulling him hard against her for, what? Anything he wanted, she supposed. "Come in," he said, his voice deeply emphasizing the come. Flavia forgot the formidable Ms. Lane. She probably forgot her own name as her feet carried her into his house. No, his hotel room, for that's what it was. A big stark suite with hotel furnishings and nothing personal lying around, like he didn't really live here. She stopped in the middle of the floor, wanting to sag onto the couch before her legs gave out, but if she did, she wasn't sure she'd manage to get up again. The dining table might be best. She could sit at the head of the table, place the contract documents at the other end, and have the length of wood between them when he sat down to read what he could and couldn't do to her. What he could do to her. Flavia just made it to the table before her wobbly legs refused to hold her anymore. She was in way over her head. "Can I get you a drink?" Jay stood in the kitchen, one hand on the fridge door. "Yes, please. A glass of the strongest stuff you have, and make it a double," Flavia thought but didn't say. Instead she quavered, "No thank you." She stared at him and felt a blush heating her cheeks. To cover her discomfiture, she lifted her bag onto her lap and rifled through it for the folder of documents. When she found it, she held it up as a shield between her and the abs that were taunting her to taste them. "You want to get the paperwork sorted first? Good idea. Then we're free to enjoy ourselves as much as we like." Jay moved to the table and sat on the chair closest to her, stretching his legs beneath the table until his knee bumped hers. The contact sent a jolt that traveled right up to her heart, which did jumping jacks until it lodged in her throat as she realized that his leg remained right beside hers. Skin on skin, heating her more than she thought humanly possible. "Mr. Felix." It came out as a squeak, so she started again. "Mr. Felix, I've prepared a list of acceptable conduct for you, both during and after our contract. I'm sure you are already aware of the condition that there will be no further contact between us once the transaction is complete, but there are other things that—" She watched in horror as Jay plucked the folder from her fingers and scanned the first page. He flipped to the next dot and the next until he came to the signature page. He couldn't have read them that quickly. No one read that quickly. Jay produced a pen from his pocket and winked at her. His eyes never leaving hers, he signed the last page with a flourish and pushed the folder across the table to her. "Are we done with the boring stuff?" Flavia stared at his signature. He'd agreed to everything? Without even reading it? "I thought you might want to discuss." His finger touched her lips, effectively silencing her. "What's there to discuss? You're here because you want your first time to be with me. You tell me what you want, what you need, and I'll make sure you never forget your first time, because no one else will ever measure up." He set an envelope on top of the signed contract. "The details of a numbered Swiss account with my bid amount as the balance are in there. It's yours." Not yet, it wasn't. First he had to. Where would you like to do it? Flavia choked out. Jay chuckled. You're eager to get my clothes off, aren't you? I figured we'd take it slowly, but it's really not up to me. When our bodies unite in shared passion for the first time and you cry out in ecstasy, everything should be just the way you like it. He leaned over the table so that his face was centimeters away from hers. In your dreams, the wild fantasies you've woven as you wondered what it would be like with me, where did you want me to worship you? She was drowning in his eyes, glowing like the water of the Avon River when the sun shone just right. Drowning so deeply she'd never reach shore on her own. But in his arms, oh! The shore, she blurted out, then added, I mean the beach. SSS's sex on the beach. Sand cradling her body as the warm water caressed her and his leaned forward and his lips grazed hers, breaking the spell. Flavia leaped backwards, chair and all. No kissing. It's in the contract you just signed. Annoyance creased his perfect brow. What? You can't be serious. Flavia tried to slow her racing heart. Read it if you don't believe me. No kissing, no kinky stuff, no. Jay burst out laughing. Whatever you say, baby. How about we head out to my private beach where it'll just be you and me? Then you can decide what you want and what you don't. I'll make sure it's better than your wildest dreams. Flavia swallowed. She believed him. And in a dream, she followed him out of the villa and onto the warm sand. Waves licked languorously at the beach, waiting for her and Jay to join them. 16. Zahn thought she caught the sound of thumping helicopter blades, but when she walked outside to check, the sky was disappointingly clear. It was only the jet boat's throbbing engines, as Baz brought the last supply run before the weekend. He waved from the wheelhouse and she waved back, wishing she had time to go for a spin in the Sound with him. It had been weeks since she'd had time for a roller coaster ride through the whirlpools, but she was dying to do it again. Soon, she promised herself. When the boat came back from dry dock next week, the freshly painted hull would slide across the surface better than the hydrofoil that belonged to one of the tour companies in town. The tide was in, so when Baz tied up the Argo, he only had to heft the boxes from the deck to the jetty instead of winching them ashore. Not that he liked using it, he usually complained that the winch was too slow and he'd rather lift the boxes himself. Zahn didn't mind if it was the laundry bags, those were easy to toss to the deck, no matter how low the tide. A 3-meter drop didn't damage the dirty linen. But when it was a crate of milk that were all the dairy they'd have for a week, or a case of expensive spirits in glass bottles, Zahn drew the line. She'd seen Baz drag the milk crates up the ladder, canted at an angle so precarious she couldn't understand how he'd managed to stop the milk bottles from tumbling into the water below. The sound of trundling trolley wheels behind Zahn told her that she wasn't the only one waiting for the supply boat. Patel and Lee headed down the jetty to collect the food so they could safely stash it in the cool room. Don't forget your beer, boys, Baz said, clunking a box to the boards that Zahn knew wasn't on the resort's manifest. Remember, you're both on call for the Easter weekend, she warned them. Patel waved away her worries. We won't forget, Ms. Lane. Besides, the bar isn't open until next week. This is all the beer we have for a whole week. Put like that, a case wasn't likely to go very far between the two men. Zahn let it go. No bar. But we heard the hotel bar here was one of the main attractions. Best beer in the Kimberley on tap, the website said. Zahn whirled at the sound of an unfamiliar voice. Baz had a passenger, two actually. Two scruffy-looking men in cargo pants and t-shirts started unloading a stack of Pelican cases that didn't look like anything the resort had ordered, either. One of them extended a large hand. I'm Simon and this is Tim. We spoke on the phone last week. We're here to film your island in all its glory. But without the bar, I guess. Zahn accepted the handshake, her mind trying to fill in details and coming up blank. You were supposed to be here hours ago. I had the helicopter pilot on standby. Tim and Simon exchanged glances. We had so much gear it was too much for one trip. We hired a car instead and took the boat over, Tim said loudly. Simon nodded and clambered over the seats to get another case. Tim dropped his voice to a carrying whisper. Simo used to work on the oil and gas rigs. Only way on and off was by helicopter. One day, the pilot was so high on drugs he decided his helicopter was a dragonfly and tried to skim across the top of the waves. A big wave washed over the top of it, and Simo and the others had to swim for their lives or sink to the bottom. Then he was stuck on a life raft with the puking pilot for 2 days before a survey ship picked them up. The pilot had dried out by then, no trace of the drugs in his system, so he's still licensed to fly. Simo won't go back after that. He won't get in another helicopter, he says. Zan nodded, though she didn't entirely believe him. Surely she'd have heard of a helicopter crash if it had almost claimed lives. She considered for a moment. Actually, she probably wouldn't. If it was the oil and gas company's helicopter, not a commercial charter, and the drilling platform was far enough offshore, it would be outside Australian jurisdiction. They wouldn't have to report the incident to anyone. It really was the edge of civilization out here. Well, you're here now. I'm Zan Lane, the manager of the resort, as you've probably already guessed. We only have a skeleton staff with no guests on the island, so I've arranged to put you up in the staff accommodation. If you'll come with me, I'll get your wristbands and you'll be good to get settled in. Zan led the way to land. Ms. Lane? What about our gear? These are specialist cameras and lenses. What if someone tries to steal it? Zan laughed. Guys, welcome to Romance Island Resort. Now you're here, there are exactly 10 people on the island. The only way on or off it is via that boat, she pointed at Baz, motoring slowly away from the jetty, or by helicopter, which is currently on the mainland. Unless we have a new species of shutterbug seagull, your gear will either be right here or on a trolley outside your rooms, depending on how long it takes the boys to unload the catering supplies. The thump of twin pairs of footsteps on the jetty told her they were following, so she continued toward the main building. She took a deep breath. All meals are served in the staff dining room, starting with dinner tonight at 7. I'll point that out to you on the way to your accommodation. We'll meet at 9 tomorrow morning to discuss your filming schedule so we can make sure you're familiar with safety at a site like this. You can ask any questions you have then too. Ms. Lane, we'd like to spend a few hours surveying the territory before we start filming tomorrow. Take some pictures, maybe some video, so we can decide what parts of the island will work best. Will that be a problem? She wasn't sure which of the men had spoken, but it didn't matter. Of course not, Zan replied. Go wherever you like. With the hotel closed and no guests, it won't matter where you film, as long as you keep your cameras out of the staff bathrooms. She couldn't keep the darkness from seeping into her tone for that last part. Cameras in the women's bathroom had been an ongoing problem at the backpackers' hostel she used to manage. She'd never had that problem at the resort, though maybe that was because of the extra friendly frog population here. 17. My beach has the best view of sunset over the lagoon. When you've had your fill of me, we can take a break and lie on the beach watching the sunset before we do it all over again, Jay said as he led the way between the palm trees. Alarm bells sliced through the lusty fog in Flavia's head as she squinted up at the sun, still high in the sky. Once only, she croaked, then cleared her throat and tried again. That's in the papers you signed too. The deal was to have sex once and that's all. Not all afternoon and evening, as many times as you want. That's not part of the deal. Jay stopped so suddenly she almost ran into his back. Her nose came dangerously close to the dip between his shoulder blades before she reared back to maintain her distance. He turned and stared at her. You know your first time might hurt a bit, right? And that it's better the second and maybe even the third time? You seriously think you'll only want to sleep with me once? No, her brain whimpered as Flavia managed to say aloud, that's the deal. Honey gold eyes held hers for what seemed like an eternity. I don't think you know what you're getting into, he said softly. But if you want more, when you want more, just say so. It's your deal and you set the terms. If you want something to dream about later, you won't want to just remember the pain. Flavia swallowed as icy cold fingers closed over her heart. Yes, of course she knew her first time would hurt. She'd been trying not to think about it, but Jay's insistence meant now she could think of nothing else. Not his hands on her or the erotic dreams that had fueled her courage the last week. The thought of pain as he penetrated her, and would she scream? Cry? Oh God, what if she cried? She didn't want him to see her cry. A white sandy beach spread out before her, edged by palm trees. Flavia forced her breathing to slow. This wasn't so bad. Sex on the beach in paradise, with a rock god who had a body to match. She could do this. Just as long as he didn't see her cry. Flavia stripped off her clothes with shaking hands and draped them over the sign confirming that this was indeed a private beach. Once naked, she didn't dare glance down or she'd lose her nerve. She didn't even want to meet Jay's eyes. Instead, she turned her back on him and walked toward the water. A warm wave caressed her toes, teasing her before it retreated, tempting her to come in deeper. Here would do. The sand was soft and Flavia could fix her eyes on the horizon as he. She dropped to her knees in the water, then leaned forward so she was on all fours. She had to swallow 3 times before her voice could actually form the words. Here. I want you to do me right here. Doggy style. Now. She forced her body to stay still, instead of shaking to pieces like she felt it wanted to. A soft splash told her Jay was right behind her. Lightly he touched her backside. Flavia jerked away. You don't get to touch my ass. That's off limits, she barked. What do you want? He ran a finger up her spine until his hand rested on the back of her neck. You don't want kisses. You don't want me to touch you. You seriously want me to fuck you, right here and now, without any foreplay? That's fucked up. It's not how I do things. His fingers traced circles at the nape of her neck, tickling the skin of her back as the circles grew wider. Tell me what you want, baby. She'd never felt so vulnerable. So small. Naked on a beach with a man behind her who she couldn't see. Flavia tensed and edged her knees wider apart on the sand. I want you to fuck me right here. Right now. Where had she picked up a stutter? Damn it, why was he drawing this out? Something sharp dug into her knee and Flavia focused on the pain, which would distract her from the rising panic of anticipation of worse pain when he. If you don't do it right now, she continued, wincing as a wave washed over her leg and the salt turned mild discomfort into a stinging sensation across her right kneecap. She gritted her teeth. If you don't fuck me right now, I'll go to the press. I'll tell them Jay Felix has to pay for sex. He buys virgin girls for sex. I'll say he's an impotent pussy who can't even get it up when a girl begs him for it. Quit screwing around and fuck me. She shifted her knee, hoping to stop it from hurting, but if anything, the stinging grew worse. She tried and failed to stifle a gasp. His hands weren't touching her anymore. She wanted to turn and look, but forced herself to focus her gaze on the horizon. Not the man behind her who probably needed both hands to undress himself and put on a condom. Are you sure? Jay didn't sound sure. He sounded like he wanted out of this deal. But Flavia was angry now, fueled by rage at the pain in her knee and the agonizing embarrassment that she was naked on a beach in front of this man and he still hadn't done what she asked. Wasn't she good enough for him? Not good enough for James, not good enough for anyone. She wouldn't be the $1 million girl if she didn't do this. Instead, she'd be worthless. Yes, I'm fucking sure, she snapped. She felt his breath between her legs on her. But baby, you're not ready. You're not. Wait, are you bleeding? Is that blood? His hand wrapped around her thigh just above her knee. It is. You're hurt. You are bleeding. It's all over the sand and in the water too. The sand's red and it's. With no warning, a heavy weight descended on her back, forcing her down toward the water. She screamed, but the sound cut off with a gurgle as Jay pushed her face beneath the surface. 18. The sound of screaming had Zan on her feet and running for the source before her brain had processed that it wasn't coming from a bathroom. This sounded like it was coming from Pearl Beach, and yes, while it was so high-pitched it did sound like a girl. Experience had taught her that screaming men didn't sound much different. She burst through the last of the palms and spotted the girl, Flavia, wrestling with Jay in the shallows, still screaming hysterically. "Get off her, you wanker!" Zahn shouted, charging in to help Flavia. Together, they shoved the surprisingly unresisting asshole off the naked girl. Jay lay on his back in the water, unconscious. Zahn was impressed. Flavia must have knocked the raping bastard out before he could even take his pants off. "Are you all right?" she asked the girl. Shivering even in the heat, Flavia crossed the beach and pulled her dress over her head to cover her nakedness, before struggling into her underwear. Wide-eyed with fright, the girl didn't seem capable of saying a word. Zahn looked her over. She was soaking wet from head to toe, but it didn't look like she was badly injured. A streak of red trickled down her leg. Blood. Miss Chastity wasn't a virgin anymore, and it had taken a bastard like Jay to end that for her. She glared at Jay, but he was still out cold. Maybe she should just leave him on the beach to drown. Running footsteps slowed as they hit the sand. "We saw everything from across the lagoon," Tim gasped out. She shouted something at him, and then he attacked her. "Got here as fast as I could while Simo." He flapped a hand in the direction of the far shore, where the Simon stood with a camera in hand. "Filmed everything." Tim sucked in another breath. "You can show the police what he did to her." Zahn nodded, thinking. "Help me get him out of the water. Bring him up the beach a bit so he doesn't drown." He deserved to, but Zahn decided to leave him to the mercies of the criminal justice system instead. She'd send him to the police to sort out. She grabbed one arm, Tim grabbed the other, and together they dragged Jay's body up to the path. Next, she pulled out her phone, then changed her mind and tapped her wristband instead. She scrolled through the options until she found the option she'd insisted I'd create for the owner, his initials, JF. The alert zipped straight to maintenance, alerting Lee to get a trolley big enough to carry Jay when he'd drunk himself into a stupor so deep he wouldn't wake up, plus enough cleaning supplies to deal with the mess he usually left behind. A quick check told her Jay was still breathing as he always was, and for once he didn't reek of alcohol and vomit. He'd probably been washed clean in the water, that's why, Zahn mused. She rose and addressed Tim. "You and Simon head back to the main building. Get hold of the IT guys. I want you to download whatever footage you have of this incident, so we can give it to the police. Tell Seb and Cam, the IT guys, to recall the helicopter. Say it's urgent." She looked at pale-faced Flavia. "Take her with you. See if you can get her to drink a cup of tea in the staff dining room. Make sure she's okay." Tim eyed her and the wretched rockstar. "Are you sure you'll be okay with him? What if he gets violent again?" Zahn scanned the beach until she found what she wanted. Crossing to the pile of driftwood, she hefted a piece that would make a suitable club. She smacked one end into her palm. "Then I'll clout him again." She hoped Jay gave her the opportunity this time, but when he was out for hours. "I'll be fine. I've alerted maintenance and they'll be here shortly to help me." Tim nodded. After a polite, "ladies first," to Flavia, he followed the girl back through the foliage to the hotel. Zahn crouched beside Jay, leaning over to delicately sniff his breath. He really didn't smell like he'd been drinking at all. Why then had he tried to force a girl into having sex with him? Had she panicked partway through when he hurt her, the telltale blood on her leg, and decided she didn't want to go through with it after all? That's what must have happened. Jay, being the entitled asshole he was, would have made a brutish comment about how he'd paid for her, so he'd have her, and she'd had to fight him off. What had she hit him with though? It's not like there were any rocks or driftwood clubs within reach of where they'd been struggling in the water. If he didn't come to before the helicopter arrived, Sho would have to take him to hospital instead of the police station. The emergency department could check him over under the watchful eyes of Broome Police. She'd call them the moment Sho and Jay were in the air and on their way, so whoever was on duty could meet them the moment Sho landed. Bloody hell. Just what she didn't need right now. Jay had this horrible way of messing everything up, even her Easter weekend. At least this hadn't happened in front of guests. Once he was safely locked up, no one at the hotel would be in danger from the asshole. If he was stupid enough to try forcing himself on one girl, how many of his conquests had been bullied the same way? What if some of the hotel staff who'd left had also been raped by him? She didn't need this kind of bad press for the resort. Not now. She was about to embark on a major PR campaign. She should just kill him, push him back into the water and let the waves do the work for her. It would be justice. It would. "Ms. Lane?" Lee said softly. "I brought a wheelbarrow when I saw the location of your report. Can you help me lift Mr. Felix in?" He tipped the wheelbarrow on an angle so the lip lay flush with the sand. Together the two of them heaved, panted, struggled and swore until they'd managed to get Jay's limp body mostly into the wheelbarrow. His arms and legs hung over the sides as usual, but the bulk of his weight was in there. It took all of their combined strength to push the barrow through the powdery sand to the paved path, where Lee could manage the load on his own. "To Villa Penguin, Ms. Lane?" Zahn shook her head. "No. To the helipad this time. Better get him to hospital. I think he hit his head." There was no sign of blood or bruising, but maybe it was too early for a swelling to form. That was something the doctors could deal with. Not her problem. If he died of internal bleeding, it would be his own damn fault. 19. Jason woke with his head pounding. No, this time the pounding was outside his head, it wasn't hurting like a hangover. What the fuck had happened? What was that thumping sound? He pried one eye open and examined his surroundings. A glass ceiling. That wasn't normal. Curved too, and it felt like the ground was moving, lifting. A voice he could only hear faintly over the thumping. "Broom Tower, this is Victor Hotel." Fuck. How'd he get in a helicopter? He was supposed to be having sex with some chick on the beach. The angry one who'd wanted it doggy style, rough as guts, when he'd planned on taking it slowly. There'd been blood in the water from a cut on her leg and then fuck. "Where the fuck are you taking me? I'm not leaving this fucking island." Jason sat up and glared at Sho. Sho's tone didn't change from its flat calm. "Relax, Mr. Felix. You've taken a blow to the head. Ms. Lane called me to take you to hospital. Just lie back and I'll soon have you in the capable hands of." "Not that fucking matron. She wants to get her hands on my dick." When Jason realized that described most of the Australian female population, Miss Chastity included, he added, "She wants to stick things in it. She's fucked up kinky in a bad way. I'm not going back to her." "Mr. Felix, refasten your seatbelt please. You need to keep it on until we're safely on the ground at Broome Airport." Jason leaned over the seat so he could really get in the pilot's face. "I said I'm not going to any fucking hospital. Or town. Put this fucking helicopter back on my island now." "I can't, Mr. Felix. Ms. Lane said I couldn't come back until I'd handed you to." The last few words were mumbled too low for Jason to hear them. "Who did Zahn say to hand me to? Is she good buddies with Madame Matron?" Jason demanded. Sho swallowed. "The police, Mr. Felix. She said you'd hurt a girl and they'll arrest you when we land. I just had to get you to the mainland." "What fucking girl?" Sho's hands shook on the stick, thought the helicopter still rose steadily. "The one I brought here earlier this afternoon. The one who thought I was going to drive her out to the middle of nowhere and dump her body in the desert, when you—" "I didn't do anything to her. I never touched her. I fucking passed out and woke up here with you." Jason didn't know what to do. He'd never had to deal with anything like this on his own before. That's what the band had a manager for. A manager and PR and Scary Trevor, the ex-Marine security guy. He needed to call someone and get them to figure this mess out. "Get me on the ground. Flight time to Broome is now. Put me back on the ground now or I'm jumping out of your fucking helicopter." Jason peered out the window at the water below. It looked deep enough to drop into, and he'd been in the swim squad back at school. Swimming back to the island would be like a couple lengths of the lagoon. "Mr. Felix, please." Fucking bird. Down. Now. Ms. Lane will kill me. I'll kill you, Jason thought, but he knew he wouldn't. Violence wasn't his style. I'll handle the hotel manager. Now put this bird back on my helipad. When the pilot hesitated, Jason reached over him and grabbed the stick, tilting the helicopter down. No. We'll crash. Sit down, Mr. Felix, so I can land us safely. Green flashed through one window as the helicopter tilted at an alarming angle before the pilot straightened them out. Jason saw someone sprinting along the path, headed for the helipad. Probably Zahn, ready to tackle him to the ground. No, she'd probably set some of the grounds or security staff on him, wouldn't want to dirty her hands with him. Fine. As soon as they were low enough, he'd jump onto the roof or something and surprise them. They were level with the treetops now, it was now or never. Jason cracked open the door. Sho howled a protest, but Jay couldn't hear him over the noise of the blades and the wind rushing past. Just like he'd seen people do in movies, Jay wrapped his hands around the metal strut below the door and swung his body out the door, so he hung from the helicopter by his hands. Fuck, what a rush. Like skydiving, only without the falling. Right. There was the roof where he played golf on top of Zahn's office. A perfect landing spot. He swung his legs, wanting to get the angle just right. On the count of 3, he told himself. 1, 2. The helicopter tilted again and his hand slipped, so he was only hanging on with one hand. Fuck. Couldn't hold the weight. Had to let go. Curl up into a ball, roll with the impact, hope he didn't break anything. Jason landed in the crown of a palm tree, but the tree wasn't strong enough to take his weight, so as he grasped at anything his hands touched, the fronds were inexorably tipping him toward the ground. He wrapped his arms and legs around the trunk and held on for dear life. A clang and a crack echoed across the island and something black whipped away into the jungle, only a few meters away from him. Jason heard the warning beeps from the open door of the helicopter, as it skewed sideways through the palm trees toward the helipad. He slid to the ground, remembering to bend his knees to absorb the impact, before crouching low behind a tree as he waited for the helicopter to explode. Seconds passed. Then a minute. 2. Maybe not all crashed helicopters exploded after all. You broke my baby and made her crash. The shriek came from the direction the helicopter had gone in. Where a furious Sho was running from. I'll kill you. Jason had had enough. He'd just been accused of a crime he didn't commit, one Zahn wanted him arrested for, and he'd just survived jumping out of a helicopter before it crashed and the pilot was angry? Fuck that. You just tried to kidnap a fucking rockstar from his home. Jason roared, unleashing the full power of his voice over the island like it was an arena full of screaming fans. If I want to burn your fucking helicopter and send you to prison for the rest of your fucked up life, I will. Now shut the fuck up. Where's Zahn? He sucked in a deep breath and bellowed, Zahn Lane? Get your ass out here. I want some fucking answers. 20. The sounds of the helicopter faded as Zahn turned her attention to the 4 men huddled around the biggest monitor in the room. Yep, you can see it clearly, Simon said, pointing. Right here. A girl's voice, shouting indistinctly, then screaming a few seconds later. A pause, then more screaming. He made her take her clothes off, get down in the water, and when she shouted at him to stop, he shoved her down and forced himself on her. Shit. That's messed up. Not as messed up as seeing them struggling firsthand, Zahn thought. Show me, she demanded, and the men parted to allow her to see the screen. It was pretty much as they'd described it. They'd been filming a slow panorama across the lagoon, but when they heard shouting, the camera zeroed in on the couple, just in time for some grainy footage of Jay landing on top of Flavia. Can you do anything with the sound so we can hear what she shouted? Zahn asked. The men all looked at each other, then Tim frowned. I can think of a couple of software programs that might be able to help. Do you have an internet connection here? Cam and Seb almost fell over themselves to assure him there was, and opened a web browser on the big screen for him. Zahn waited impatiently for a few minutes while nothing happened before she said, how long will this take? Tim shrugged. Once it downloads, anything from a few minutes to a few hours, depending on how much cleanup is required for the audio. No way to tell until we start. Zan held up her phone. Right. You keep working on it then. Call me when you have something. Speaking of making calls, she needed to phone Broome Police Station to make sure they were ready to greet Jay when he landed. But she could do that in the comfort of her office, or even her flat, instead of here. Office, she decided, striding down the corridor to the foyer. She'd left her computer on, and she may as well shut everything down properly, seeing as she had no intention of doing any further work after she knocked off. In about another 15 minutes. She dialed the number as she closed her email. Broome Police Station, Constable Nelson speaking. Hi Naomi. It's Zan, over at Romance Island Resort. Zan could almost hear Naomi smiling into the phone. Have you killed him yet? That up-himself celebrity who lost his license on the Labor Day weekend? Or has he flown home and out of your hair? Jay had lost his license, huh? That might explain why he'd stayed at the resort so much instead of picking up fangirls at the pubs in town. Funny you should mention him. There's been an incident here at the hotel. I'm trying to find out more, but he invited a guest to stay with him, which is fine, but today one of our staff found them wrestling and the girl knocked him unconscious. Naomi whistled. Did you buy the girl a beer? Ask her what it felt like? Zan winced. Not really. She's not saying much. I think she's still in shock. Look, like I said, we're still trying to work out what happened, but at the moment we suspect rape. One of the cameras at the resort caught some of the incident, and we've got our IT guys trying to clean up the footage to see what actually happened. He's still unconscious, so I got a couple of the guys to carry him into the helicopter. Show's on his way to the airport with him now. He definitely assaulted the girl, nearly drowned her in fact. I had to pull him off her. Will that be enough for you to charge him when he arrives? I told him I'd arrest him on sight if he showed his face in town again, so sure. When did you say he left the island? Zan checked her watch. Maybe 10-15 minutes ago? Plenty of time for you to beat him to the airport. I'll need to take witness statements. How long is the victim staying at the resort? Zan choked out a laugh. I think she'll want to be on the next ride out, to be honest, but I can. An almighty crash outside stopped her in her tracks. Now what? One sec, Naomi. Something's happened outside and I need to check it out. Can I call you back? Silence was her only reply. Naomi? More silence. Zan hung up the phone. She had another disaster to sort out. At least this one couldn't possibly involve Jay fucking Felix. 21. Zan. She bolted out of the main building, then skidded to a halt at the sight of him. What in hell are you doing here? You should be halfway to Broome by now. This is my fucking island, Jason spat. I live here. What kind of bullshit story did you spin to the pilot to get him to take me to Broome? Said I'd hurt some girl? I never hurt a single fucking girl in my life. He glared at her. Good thing too. 'Cause if you were a man, I'd deck you right here and now. He was so furious, he fucking meant it too. Zan looked like she wanted to take a step back, but she didn't. Oh yeah? What about Miss Chastity, your little girlfriend? The one you almost drowned this afternoon? What the fuck are you on about? I barely touched her. Zan straightened with a righteous sniff. Don't bullshit me. I saw you. It took two of us to get you off her, and that's after she knocked you out. She didn't knock me out. Jason protested. I fucking fainted, that's all. Zan snorted. Yeah, right. You expect me to believe the big bad rockstar banged that poor girl, then had a fit of the vapors and fainted? Jason opened his mouth to defend himself, but Zan wasn't through yet. I saw the blood trickling down her leg. Your little virgin isn't one anymore. From what I saw, it didn't look good. Rape's still illegal, even if you're paying the girl for sex. Or did she hit you so hard that you forgot about that? Jason had no words. His mouth gaped open, as vacant as his mind right now. Was this some kind of fucked up dream? It had to be. Nothing made sense in it. He just wanted to wake up so it would end. Now he understood Angel's nightmares. Jason swallowed and lowered his voice. We were just getting started on foreplay when I fainted, all right? I think she cut herself on a shell or something. We didn't do anything. Not yet. Fuck. He ran his fingers through his hair and came up with leaves. He threw them on the ground. Did she tell you this shit? Just what I need. Another fucked up crazy bitch. She said you checked her police clearance, but I guess you missed the crazy part. Where is she now? Zahn pressed her lips together. Like I'd tell you after what I saw. Jason was tired of arguing. Just fucking ask her. Say you've already talked to me and my lawyers will make fucking mincemeat of her if she tries lying. I will. Zahn's expression turned from angry to suspicious. How come you're not in the helicopter anyway? Did you threaten Sho if he didn't let you out before he took off? Jason managed a smug smile. Nope. I jumped out. The shock on Zahn's face was worth every ache he'd have tomorrow. You did what? Jumped out of a flying helicopter? How did you manage that without killing yourself? She demanded. I knew what I was doing. I aimed for the roof right over your office. I know every centimeter of it from playing golf up there. Zahn's breath hissed out like an angry snake. So the crash I heard earlier was you, throwing yourself out of a helicopter? Bloody hell, Jay, you're lucky you didn't break something. He decided not to mention the helicopter. Zahn closed her eyes, then looked to the skies as if hoping for answers. All right. I'll go ask her what happened. She hasn't said a word yet, for the record. I only know what I saw, and what I saw was you on top of her and her struggling to get free. Just. She clenched her hands like she wished they were around his throat. Go into my office and wait for me there while I decide whether to call the police to bring their helicopter over here to arrest you. Your rockstar reputation won't protect you if you're as full of shit as I think you are. When Jason didn't move, she stamped her foot. Go. I'm not moving until you're inside. Jason shrugged and ambled into the foyer. When he glanced back outside, she'd gone. Good. He had a crazy girl to locate. If the rape story Zahn spouted was second-hand, he needed to hear it from the source. He strode down the corridor to IT. The IT population had doubled. Seb and Cam had two other guys in there, all watching some video. Jason glanced at it and was stunned to see a grainy recording of his own fainting fit. He fell flat on top of the poor girl in the water. Fuck. That explained the drowning bit. But rape? Really? The video would show he'd barely touched her. Rewind that and play it again from the beginning, Jason demanded. All four men jumped. Seb and Cam's geezers slid away to look anywhere but at him, while the other two seemed frozen in place. Jay, Felix, one of them managed to say. Jason grunted his assent. The manager said there weren't any guests at the island, so we could video wherever we wanted. We had no idea, the guy gushed. Jason jerked his head at the video. Could have fooled me. Looks like you were filming me and my friend with your zoom lens while we were on our private beach. Show me what you got. Shock turned the guy's face paler than beach sand. Why yes, Mr. Felix. Right away. Several seconds later, Jason watched in horrified fascination as the camera panned around the lagoon, taking in rocks, waves and secluded beaches, before unintelligible shouting drew the cameraman's attention to the source. There she was, on her hands and knees in the surf, and Jason saw himself straighten and take a step away from her, before keeling over on top of her, like a skittle in a bowling alley. Fuck. He watched the girl struggling to get out from under him before Zahn appeared to join in the battle. What happened to first aid? To fucking checking the unconscious patient first? Jason turned away from the screen. He understood what Zahn thought she'd seen, but she was dead wrong. And if she didn't believe him, he'd make the girl tell the truth. Fuck, he didn't even know her name. Where is she? Jason demanded. The hotel manager told me to take her to the staff dining room to have tea, so I did, the cameraman volunteered. Tea. Trust English Zahn to suggest something as silly as tea. Crazy girls didn't sit at a table drinking tea. Jason pointed at Cam. Use her ID. Find her. Cam nodded shakily and his fingers skidded across the keys of the nearest computer. Helipad, he said breathlessly. Where the helicopter crashed. Oh fuck. He set off at a run. The last thing Jason wanted was for the girl to die in the crash he'd caused. 22. Flavia blinked at the uncomfortably hot styrofoam cup in her hands. She was slowly recovering from the shock of what exactly had happened. Jay had shoved her under the water, but when she and the hotel manager had managed to free her, he was out cold. Had the manager hit him? Flavia didn't think so. Tangled with him the way she was, she'd have felt the impact of a blow. Unless she hit him before he'd landed on her, and that's why he fell. She shook her head. It didn't matter. This whole mess had turned into a disaster of epic proportions. Yet here she was, nursing a cup of tea that she had no intention of drinking. Flavia knew what to do when disaster struck. It was time to cut her losses and head back to Perth, so she could catch a plane to Bali. Days of cocktails by the pool with the girls would soon banish this bad dream from her mind. Bugger virginity auctions and men in general. Her first time would be on her terms and the bloke would consider himself bloody lucky to have her. Flavia rose. She dusted off her dress, though the salt-stiffened fabric resisted her efforts at smoothing it. She should probably change clothes before she left the island. She needed to retrieve her bag too. Hoping Jay wouldn't be home, she slipped out of the staff canteen and followed the path around the lagoon. She found his villa after a couple of wrong turns, but the door stymied her until she remembered her wristband, the one she still wore despite the struggle on the beach. Not expecting the waterlogged wristband to work, she waved it at the scanner and gasped when the door slid open. Her bag was right where she'd left it, beside her chair. The document-littered dining table brought her up short. She needed the signed contracts just in case. Sweeping the mess of papers back into her folder, she shoved the whole thing into her bag and zipped it up. There. She thought about changing clothes but decided against it. She'd be soaked in sweat after 5 minutes outside anyway, and hours of plane travel would only crumple it worse than it was now. She'd change when she reached the hotel in Bali. When her holiday would truly start. Until then, she had a plane to catch. But first, the helicopter. Holding her head high, Flavia marched out of the villa, her suitcase dogging her heels. She found the helipad gate on her first try, thanks to the signs pointing the way. The helicopter was home too, but empty. She sat on her suitcase to wait. The weather had other ideas. The clouds overhead decided to dump their load on her head, unable to wait any longer. Swearing, Flavia made a dash for the nearest shelter, the inside of the helicopter. The door clicked open, allowing her entry, before she slammed it shut behind her. There. The rain couldn't get her now. But boredom could. Flavia hauled her bag onto the seat beside her, and pulled out the paperwork. On top was the no kissing, no kinky stuff contract she and Violet had dreamed up together to put him off, but it hadn't worked. Worthless now. Seizing the pages in both hands, she ripped the contract in two. There. She flung the paper on the floor. The deal was off. She was free to join her friends and have fun for once. Flavia pulled out her phone. She should probably call Violet to tell her the good news. Depressing the power button, she waited for the screen to chime into life. The error message across it wasn't what she wanted though. It said there was no network connection and only emergency calls could be made. She held it up, moving it around the cramped cabin, trying to get a signal, but no matter how many times she made her phone search for a network, it found none. When she got to Broome then. When she could book the next available flight out of here and onward to Bali. Movement caught her eye and she peered out into the rain to see what it was. A blurry figure approached the helicopter. He cracked open the door. "Finally!" Flavia exclaimed. "I thought you'd leave me waiting here forever. I have a flight to catch. How soon until we leave?" "That eager to get out of here?" "It wasn't the pilot. You spun a story about rape to the staff here so I'd be arrested, and by the time the police think to question the witness, you're long gone with my money." Jay reached into her folder of papers and pulled out the envelope. He seemed sad. "It was all about the money, wasn't it? I mean, the contract means nothing to you." He eyed the ripped pages. Flavia stared at the envelope. "I didn't mean to take that. It must have been between the rest of the papers on the table when I gathered them up. I can't take that. I didn't deliver the goods as promised. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I wasn't even going to go through with the auction. I was going to call it off and then it ended and you." She swallowed. "I'm sorry. This didn't turn out anything like I expected." "Yeah, me neither. Are you even a virgin?" "Yes." Jay snorted. "So you're going back on the auction block now? When we had a deal?" "No." It came out louder than Flavia expected. "I never intended to do it. I tried to cancel the auction before it ended. It was a mistake." She laughed weakly. "And while I was sitting at my desk panicking that I'd ended the thing instead of canceling it, the auction winner sent me an email with a picture of him as a magazine centerfold attached." Her cheeks grew unnaturally hot. "I thought it was a joke at first, but the more research I did, the more I realized that it was actually you. I couldn't say no to you." Jay's scowl broke into a grin. "You internet stalked me after I emailed you? Really?" He swung into the co-pilot's seat and shut the door. "So at what point did you decide to frame me for rape? Or was it blackmail you planned?" He leaned over the back of the seat, closer and more than a little scary. Flavia shrank back, shaking her head violently. "Nothing like that. I haven't said anything to anyone. You pushed me under the water and the next thing I knew, the hotel manager was pulling me out and you were unconscious." "Unconscious?" "Yeah. About that." Jay retreated and scratched his chin. "I must have tripped and fell. Must have hit my head somehow." "Yeah." He nodded vigorously. "Sorry I fell on you. That sort of fucked things up, didn't it? Wasn't part of the plan. I pictured this going very differently." "That makes two of us." The longer he looked into her eyes, the less she could think about anything else. Or anyone else. "Don't you wish we could just start today over again?" Jay laughed. "Fuck no. I jumped out of a helicopter today. My first time. It was awesome." Flavia couldn't help laughing. What kind of crazy man jumped out of helicopters for fun? A gorgeous rich rock star who lived in paradise. Not the sort of man she normally had anything to do with. Her laughter died. "I just wanted things to be different. More like a dream than a nightmare." "So how was it in your dreams then?" Jay winked. "Just us here, no one else. I'll keep your secrets, I promise. What happens at Romance Island stays at Romance Island, or at least I think that's what it says on the brochure someone left on my desk to approve. Tell me your dreams, baby." Honey eyes captured her in their spell. Flavia hesitated. This was a man who jumped out of helicopters for fun, she told herself. Who had more sex after one concert than she'd had in her entire life. He probably had the Kama Sutra memorized. More romance, I guess. "Oh, you wanted hearts and chocolates, flowers and dinner?" Jay shrugged. "I can do some of that at least. Come back to my place and I'll get the chef to sort out dinner and chocolate." I could probably pick some flowers as long as you don't mind a few frogs, and the resort has this incredible orgy pack that comes in a heart-shaped box. Condoms in every flavor with lickable lubes to match, and some toys even I haven't worked out where to put." Blushing furiously, Flavia didn't know what to say. Finally, she found her voice. "Not kinky stuff and food. I mean..." Oh God, he was going to make her say it. "Dancing? Serenading you on your balcony? Love letters? Bad poetry? Watching soppy chick flicks until I hurl?" He had her laughing again. "No. I meant foreplay." Understanding dawned in those eyes, turning them into twin golden suns. "You mean all the stuff you said you didn't want me to do in the contract you made me sign?" His eyes strayed to the ripped pages. "The one that doesn't apply anymore?" Wicked suns transfixed her in their beam. "No, it doesn't," she admitted reluctantly. "So I can kiss you now?" "I suppose." She didn't get to finish, and she didn't want to either. Hot lips melted hers apart, leaving her gasping for breath. His tongue beckoned hers and the dance began as Jay led masterfully and she followed. Her lips bloomed as her heart kept time to a lively beat that made the rest of her body long to join in. Jay tasted of salt and promises and… Flavia broke away. "I can't," she panted. Jay grinned. "In my professional opinion, I think you can. I think you can do anything you want to. What do you want, baby?" Oh God, he knew she wanted him. She could read it in his eyes. It couldn't hurt to tell him what he already knew. It wouldn't change anything. "I wish I could have you just once before I have to leave." Jay spread his arms. "We're here now. You can have me right here if you want." "Here? In a helicopter?" "I've always wondered what it'd be like to have sex in a helicopter. This'll be my first time." Flavia managed a faint smile. "Mine too." Jay reached out and caressed her face. "Two things first, baby. We try things my way. Anything you don't like, you say so, but when you do like what I do to you, let me know, all right?" She nodded. Jay climbed over the seat and took her in his arms. His mouth, his hands, his whole damn body were everywhere, burning her dreams into faint memories as he set her insides on fire in the most delicious ways. She stretched out across the seats, helpless in his hands as she savored every moment. "So what do you think, baby?" Flavia's blissful fog cleared enough for her to focus on his laughing eyes. "I think all the stories were true." She sucked in a deep breath. "You're the most legendary lover who ever lived." Jay burst out laughing. "Baby, that was just the beginning. A taste, or what you called it, foreplay. Would you like some more?" Before she could think, her head nodded. "I want more of you. I want to feel you inside me." "Baby, I've been inside you. You taste delicious." One finger slid between her legs and out again before he popped it into his mouth. I don't want to be a virgin anymore. And I want my first time to be with you." She attempted a smile through her nervousness. "Our first time, together in a helicopter. How can I say no to an offer like that?" His shorts joined her clothes on the floor before he sheathed his rigid length in red latex. "Strawberry flavored. Are you sure you're ready for this, baby?" Flavia flung her legs over the seat backs, so they spread wide in invitation. "Yes." She meant it too. Make me into a woman, Jay. Just being able to say his name while staring at the body she'd only seen in pictures sent a thrill deep inside her. He shifted so he knelt between her legs, the tip of his cock teasing her. "Easy does it, baby." He parted her like some biblical sea in one long slow thrust. "Are you all right?" Flavia shifted her hips, tilting them up to meet him. "Yes. I thought I'd hurt more, but oh God, that feels so good." Jay moved inside her, each thrust as tortuously slow as the first until she couldn't take it anymore. "Faster please," she begged. But he didn't relent. Slowly, steadily, her orgasm built around him as his hands and his mouth drove the rest of her to distraction. Too much. It was too much and too incredible, and oh God, this time she was going to explode. The rest of the world could go to hell because it was just her and Jay, making her whole body sing for joy. She screamed his name to the heavens. 23. Oh my God, James? At first, he thought it was his name she was screaming, until he realized it was some other bloke's. Fuck. He finished quickly, wanting to get the fuck away from her. He threw the condom on the pilot's seat, reached for his shorts and noticed the envelope on the seat beside them. Now you got what you came for, you'll be leaving, right? He asked bitterly. Her eyes were still closed, probably so she could imagine he was some other fucker. A fucker called James. Jason's heart froze within his chest. So much for being this girl's fantasy. He cracked open the door, letting the evening breeze clear his head. Here. He tossed the envelope on her bare belly, slick with sweat from their frenzied fucking. Because it wasn't anything else. Just physical. No emotional connection at all, because she spent the whole time wishing he was someone else. You earned it, Miss Chastity. He couldn't stand being near her anymore. Clambering out of the helicopter, he let the rain wash him clean. The stinging drops were nothing compared to the needling pain inside. What was the point in being some girl's first and best if she'd never remember it was him? Slinging his shorts over his shoulder, he set off through the jungle to his lonely villa.